Chapter 2:13. The majestic and infinite perception spread out. Dustless could clearly perceive that outside Konoha's ninja village, there were many sand ninja and Otogekyur ninja, led by Orochimaru, lurking in the dark, waiting for the opportunity. Worthy of being the younger brother of Itachi and Dustless. He's not bad at all against the sand village's Jinchuriki, and he even has the upper hand. Kisame's pupils dilated as he looked at Uchiha Sasuke in surprise. He couldn't help but sigh. Uchiha Fugaku and Uchiha Makoto's powerful genes. Dustless and Itachi's strength is known all over the world. Now, this young brother is also showing his edge. These three brothers will probably stand at the top of the pyramid in the future. Sasuke has a good sensei, and he also has a heart that knows how to improve. Thanks to you, Itachi. Looking at Uchiha Itachi with a smile, Dustless said sarcastically. His tone gave people a feeling of gloating, as if he was happy that Uchiha Sasuke was so crazy. Dustless's gloating look made Kisame next to him shudder unconsciously. It seems that there's indeed some problem with the genes of this family. Kisame secretly muttered. The strength of these three brothers is beyond doubt. Uchiha Sasuke's potential is also not small. He may not be as good as Dustless and Itachi now, but he will definitely be in the future. However, the temperament of the three brothers is completely opposite. Dustless gives people the strangest feeling. He does almost everything according to his heart, and he is not bound. It seems that he just wants to have fun. No one knows what his purpose is. Uchiha Itachi gave people the impression that he was thoughtful and gentle. In fact, he was a person who was cold on the outside, but warm on the inside. As for Uchiha Sasuke, he was too obvious. He was arrogant and conceited, but at the same time, he did things flawlessly. He could observe the details that ordinary people ignored. Weird family. Kisame shook his head. He really didn't know that the personalities of the three brothers were so different. Thanks to me? That is indeed the case. Uchiha Itachi didn't deny it and nodded thoughtfully. Sasuke's current appearance was indeed caused by him. And then he looked at Dustless. So-called brothers are just accessories for each other. Isn't that what you said before? Dustless curled his lips when he heard this. He knew what Uchiha Itachi was thinking, and he was too lazy to talk nonsense. After all, no one can stop him if he is willing to be a part of Uchiha Sasuke. Kisame was confused. He didn't know what Itachi meant by accessories, and he didn't want to talk about it. For him, watching the fight in front of him was more interesting. Bang! In the middle of the arena, Gaara was punched by Uchiha Sasuke. His body flew out like a broken kite. He was so weak that he slammed into the wall, causing many cracks. Uchiha Sasuke's speed was extremely fast. He once used Sharingan to copy Lee Luaku's taijutsu and trained it himself. His speed was no worse than Lee Luaku's, a taijutsu expert. Gaara's sand couldn't react at all. His speed was not proportional to Uchiha Sasuke's. Under absolute speed, he could only passively take a beating. What an amazing boy. I must get you and then take revenge on that man. Orochimaru, who was disguised as the fourth Hokage, looked down at Sasuke, who almost beat Gaara without any power to fight back. The more he looked, the more satisfied he was. Being killed by your own brother. This way of death is very suitable for you, Itachi. Orochimaru secretly thought with a strange and gloomy smile on his face. It seemed that he was attracted by the invisible evil aura emanating from Orochimaru, and the third Hokage's gaze was also cast over. Is it my illusion? The third Hokage frowned deeply, and the Chuan character on his forehead was clearly visible. This evil feeling made him feel a sense of deja vu. You damn guy. Gaara slowly stood up and stared at Uchiha Sasuke ferociously. He was like a dying beast and hysterically said with hatred, "Killing a guy like you should make my presence known." After that, the sand layers around Gaara began to converge, forming a giant sphere that tightly protected him. There was also an eye of the sand floating in the sky, obviously used for reconnaissance. Whoosh! A sharp sound rang, and a hazy black shadow whizzed out like a rushing lightning. In just an instant, It rushed to the front of the sphere and punched with all its strength. Boom! The round high-density sand sphere trembled fiercely, splashing some dust, and then some red blood flowed out from the surface. Damn, it's so hard. He quickly pulled back a distance. If he didn't destroy this thick tortoise shell, he wouldn't be able to touch Gaara. Uchiha Sasuke's heart sank slightly. His arm was numb from the shock, and the bloodstains just now were also left by him. Gaara, who was now in absolute defense, was almost invincible to Uchiha Sasuke. It seems that I can only use that. His hesitation was quickly replaced by determination. The light in Uchiha Sasuke's eyes disappeared in a flash, and a dazzling light of thunder appeared in his hand. An ear-piercing roar resounded continuously, as if thousands of birds were chirping at the same time. The sharp sound resounded through the sky, making people scalp numb. Looking at it, Uchiha Sasuke's hand was wrapped in a silver light, and the terrifying power of the thorns on it was even more chilling. It seemed that it could penetrate everything. Silver's substantialized chakra. Sure enough, it's Chidori. Dustless didn't have the slightest surprise. The creator of this technique was Kakashi, but it was Uchiha Sasuke who really exerted it to the limit. Under the surprised gaze of countless people, Uchiha Sasuke and Chidori in his hand rushed toward Gaara at full speed. Chapter 214. The conditions for learning Chidori are extremely harsh, and the physical requirements have reached the limit. It's undoubtedly Chidori, but it should be Kakashi's jutsu. I didn't expect him to teach it to Sasuke. It seems that their relationship is not a simple mentor relationship. Uchiha Itachi, who remained calm from beginning to end, said with a little surprise, "For a ninja like Kakashi, who has no Kekkei Genkai, the rare and precious jutsu Chidori can be left for future generations, and there's no need to give it to an outsider like Sasuke." It's not difficult to see that Uchiha Sasuke and Kakashi are still very compatible, and their relationship is quite good. Uchiha Itachi's fluctuating heart also relaxed. Konoha is surrounded by strong enemies, and with Kakashi's support, Uchiha Sasuke can be regarded as a safety guarantee. The harsh roar resounded through the sky, and the sharp screams made the tens of thousands of spectators who watched the Chunin exam tremble. Their hearts were abnormally throbbing as they looked at the substantialized chakra in Uchiha Sasuke's assistant's heart. Even if there are many ordinary civilians among them, they can also feel the tense atmosphere at the scene. The onlookers took a deep breath and looked at Uchiha Sasuke with rapt attention. Or rather, they looked at the lightning in his hand that pulled a long and narrow crack on the ground. They couldn't help but sweat for Gaara in absolute defense. The dazzling lightning contained a sharpness that penetrated everything, and everyone could feel it. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, Uchiha Sasuke burst out like a berserk beast. His speed was extremely fast, and his whole person was like a flash bathed in lightning, extremely dazzling. He almost instantly came to Gaara's side. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Gaara's exposed sand. I obviously detected Uchiha Sasuke, and countless sand spikes immediately extended from the sand sphere that wrapped him, stabbing at Uchiha Sasuke, trying to prevent him from touching him. Insignificant skill. I will defeat you today. Easily avoiding the spikes, Uchiha Sasuke sneered again and again, his expression wild and proud. In his opinion, the reason why Gaara stopped him from approaching him was a sign of fear. An unruly expression appeared on his young face. The silver light in his hand was like an electromagnetic field, gathering a large amount of thunder and lightning. Crackling sounds could be heard as the silver light pierced toward the round sandball without hesitation. Poochie, the sharp lightning immediately pierced through it, splashing countless gravel, and a lot of soil fell to the ground. This is lightning. Inside the absolute defense, Gaara looked at the subtle silver luster, and an unprecedented sense of danger arose spontaneously. His eyes flashed with a rare color of fear. Gazing at the oncoming Chidori, Gaara was enveloped by the scattered lightning, causing his skin to ache. He could feel the danger and extraordinariness of the lightning. I have to dodge. At the critical moment, Gaara instinctively avoided Chidori's attack and avoided the most important chess position, which was why he survived. Pucci. In the dark space inside the absolute defense, a dazzling blood flower suddenly appeared in midair, and a violent, tingling sensation suddenly spread all over his body. Gaara was stunned at first, and then he stared blankly at his pierced shoulder, wiping the bloody wound. This seems to be the first time in his life that Gaara was beaten like this. Damn it, did he dodge it? Seeing that his attack didn't kill Gaara, Uchiha Sasuke cursed and immediately retreated. Chidori is a very powerful ninjutsu, but it requires a huge amount of chakra to maintain. He is still young and doesn't have so much chakra, and he has enough energy for him to squander. It actually hurt that Jinchuriki, but fortunately, he didn't kill him. If he died, we would be in trouble. Kisame immediately saw Gaara's shoulder pierced by Chidori. Although it was a pity, he was relieved. If Jinchuriki died, Akatsuki would also be very troubled. No matter what, he is still our brother. Naturally, he can't be that bad. Looking faintly at the bloody Gaara, Dustless said calmly. At the same time, he looked at Orochimaru and frowned. The more powerful Uchiha Sasuke is, the more Orochimaru will yearn for Sharingan and Uchiha Sasuke's body. Sasuke also chases after power, and Orochimaru can make him stronger. The two of them are naturally dry when meeting fire. Uchiha Sasuke's defection can't be stopped. His character determines everything. Even if Orochimaru is the incarnation of the devil, Uchiha Sasuke, who pursues absolute power, will choose to collude with Orochimaru. Awoo! The sound of the beast's roar resounded through the sky, and a strong, murderous aura and disaster descended. The hysterical roar made Uchiha Sasuke's soul tremble. Staring at Gaara with saliva in the corner of his mouth, he subconsciously took a step back. There's something wrong with this chakra. Although it's still in his body, it's completely different from before. It's similar to Naruto that day, but it's not as evil as Naruto's chakra. Holding the dagger and looking at Gaara cautiously, Uchiha Sasuke secretly thought. He couldn't help but think of Uzumaki Naruto's violent suppression of Orochimaru a few days ago. The chakra in front of him is similar to Naruto's a few days ago. Even if it's not as dense as Uzumaki Naruto, it can still crush Uchiha Sasuke. It seems that there's something terrible in their bodies. Gaara's eyes were bloodshot and messy like a spiderweb. There was some saliva in the corner of his mouth, and his eyeballs bulged out horribly as if they were about to fall out. It was particularly terrifying. Good opportunity. Sasuke's pupils suddenly shrank. With the Sharingan, Uchiha Sasuke's insight was naturally powerful. Just now, he easily captured the weakness of Gaara's inner body due to excessive anger. Chapter 215. The Sharingan's ability to capture movement is extremely strong. If the Byakugan is an eye born for detection, then the Sharingan is an evil eye born for killing. Even the slightest loophole cannot escape from the Sharingan. Gaara, who was in a berserk state, was full of loopholes under Sharingan's observation. Whoosh! The sound of breaking air came, and a black, hazy shadow rushed straight. The sharp, cold light was obvious. It was Uchiha Sasuke with a cold face using his speed above Gaara. Little did he know that Gaara had already expected this result, and a cold smile appeared on his face. There should be a limit to your ignorance. No matter what, Gaara is still a Jinchuriki of a chibi. Even if he is the weakest of the Bijou, his strength is not something a little brat like you can handle. Sitting side by side with the Sandaime, the fourth Kazekage, Orochimaru shook his head secretly. Uchiha Sasuke's talent and effort are indisputable, but he is too arrogant and conceited. Even if a chibi's Jinchuriki is weak, he is still a Jinchuriki. Whoosh! The cold light came head-on, like an arrow, whistling straight toward Gaara. It looked like it was going to pierce his head. Ah! The roar of the beast came out of Gaara's throat again. The hoarse roar carried endless impact, and the spreading wave directly shook the oncoming dagger away. What a powerful force! Uchiha Sasuke's pupils suddenly shrank, and the impact of Shikaka's killing intent passed through him. His forehead was covered with cold sweat. Staring at Gaara, Uchiha Sasuke's throat choked uncontrollably, and the cold, murderous aura around him made his body tremble. It was a fear that came from the depths of his fate. That kid can still feel fear. It seems that the game is over. With a smile on his face, Sandaime Hokage's face was full of enjoyment, and then he looked at the fearful Uchiha Sasuke, as if he saw something incredible, and his old eyes were full of surprise. It's not a bad thing to let this fearless kid eat bones. The dry and white lips grinned, and the Sandaime secretly calculated. After all, Uchiha Sasuke has been smooth since he became a ninja. Compared to Uzumaki Naruto, his strength has improved rapidly under the influence of hatred. Hokage-sama, you don't have time to worry about others now. It's better to look at your current situation. As soon as the hoarse voice with killing intent fell, a dark dagger was placed on the Sandaime's throat, and the Sandaime's neck was bound. The one who attacked the Sandaime Hokage was Orochimaru, disguised as the Sandaime Kazekage. At the same time, countless feather-like objects fell from a void. The audience watching the Chunin exam fainted, including Uzumaki Naruto and Nara Shikamaru, who had poor resistance to Jinjutsu. In the periphery of Konoha's ninja village, the lurking Otoge-cure and Sand Ninja took the opportunity to use summoning jutsu to summon a lot of thick snakes to attack Konoha. Kazekage-sama, you should understand what this means. Triggering a war between the two sides won't do any good to the Sand Village. This old man advises you to stop, otherwise you will have to bear the consequences. The Sandaime glanced at the fourth Kazekage behind him and said in a deep voice, "If I can destroy Konoha, I don't care if there's a war. Not to mention this has nothing to do with me. It's been so long. Have you forgotten what I said to you, Sarutobi-sensei?" Yondaime Kazekage's voice suddenly changed, as if his throat was blocked. His voice became extremely hoarse, and his tone was like a poisonous snake, full of coldness. "Sure enough, it's you, Orochimaru." His body suddenly aged a few decades, and the third Hokage smiled self-deprecatingly. It can be said that Konoha's prosperity was in the hands of Orochimaru, and, at the same time, its destruction was also in his hands. I once told you that you should determine the fifth Hokage as soon as possible, but now it seems to be too late. Orochimaru licked the sharp dagger in his hand, and the cold light on it became clearer, and the refracted light seemed to be able to pierce the eyes of human beings. Too late? Who told you that? With a sneer, the third Hokage's pupils emitted a cold, killing intent, and chakra burst out of his body, and he said with hatred, "It's not too late to kill you. Today, even if the third Hokage was pedantic and ignorant, he knew that this once most trusted disciple must be eradicated, and it must be done by him." Konoha's situation at the moment was also a mess. Giant snakes constantly broke through the defense and penetrated into the interior of Konoha, and the situation was almost one-sided. When Gaara in the center of the field was about to completely kill Uchiha Sasuke, his head suddenly became dizzy, and his body was uncontrollably shaking. Good opportunity! Uchiha Sasuke saw this and suddenly rushed forward, intending to completely kill Gaara, but a tall shadow suddenly rushed in front of Gaara and easily kicked Uchiha Sasuke away. It was the Sand Village's Jonin Maki and Gaara's brother and sister. As the referee of the examination room, Gema also immediately stood in front of Sasuke, secretly observing the surrounding environment. Obviously, this so-called Chunin exam has been replaced by actual combat. It seems that your Sand Village has been plotting for a long time. This will trigger a war between the two villages. Genma, who stood in front of Uchiha Sasuke, asked angrily. Konoha was caught off guard, and without thinking, they knew that the loss must be great. Take Gaara away. He is the village's precious fighting force. Marki ignored omniscient Fire Genma and ordered Temari and Kankuro. The two looked at each other and tactfully took Gaara away from this troublesome place. Chapter 216. Time flew by like an arrow, and a few days passed by in the blink of an eye. After a series of difficult persuasion from Jiraiya and Uzumaki Naruto. Tsunade's group was finally appointed as the 5th Hokage. Later, Uchiha Sasuke realized that his strength was not as good as Uzumaki Naruto, and he was jealous. If he continued to be free, he would have no hope of revenge in his life. Finally, he remembered the cursed seal power left in his body by Orochimaru and resolutely chose to go on the road of betrayal. During this period, Konoha's ninja sent Uzumaki Naruto and others to chase Uchiha Sasuke. However, they were blocked by Oto Geikure. Only Uzumaki Naruto barely caught up with Uchiha Sasuke. The two launched an unprecedented battle in the Valley of the End, but it ended with Uchiha Sasuke's victory. It announced the failure of Konoha's plan. Uzumaki Naruto, who was in pain, realized that the gap between him and Uchiha Sasuke was still big. He made up his mind to train hard with Jiraiya for 2 years. After learning about Jiraiya and Uzumaki Naruto, Dustless of the Rain-Hidden Village breathed a sigh of relief. The rock that had been in his heart was finally settled. He just had to wait quietly for everything to start 2 years later. But obviously, some people didn't want Dustless to live so leisurely. I didn't expect that you two could go together. Speechlessly looking at the two stunning beauties who were chatting happily, Wu Chun had a headache. He never thought that these two people who had nothing to do with each other could come together. It seemed that they were familiar with each other and had a heart-to-heart talk. Did you two take the wrong script? The beauties were Konan and Otsutsuki Haguro. During the time when Dustless was away, the two women were very close to each other. Compared with Dustless, who had been teammates for many years, Konan's relationship with Otsutsuki Haguro was more harmonious and appropriate. Pain has a task for us. Seeing that Dustless had arrived, Xiaonan's expression immediately changed. Her beautiful face once again returned to its indifferent expression. She chose to frown at him coldly. Her small face turned into an unapproachable expression. Seeing that Dustless seemed to have seen an enemy, he was immediately petrified. Otsutsuki Hagoromo also left. After all, she was not a member of the Akatsuki organization, and she was too lazy to participate in those bloody and boring things. It would be more comfortable to communicate with Hinata or guide Hanrin. Mission? Looking at Xiaonan suspiciously, Dustless couldn't help but frown. There shouldn't be any missions during this period of time, especially a mission that Xiaonan personally came to find him for. The Akatsuki naturally accepts missions from the outside world. Ordinary missions can be handed over to the ordinary ninjas of the Rain Village. As for some S-level missions, even super S-level missions can only be handed over to us. Konan said indifferently. This is interesting. There is actually a mission that can use both of us. I'm curious about the origin of the other party. Dustless nodded. The most powerful member of the Akatsuki organization was the Oracle combination formed by him and Konan. The mission that can use both of them is definitely a Super S-level mission. In the dim candlelight room, a ghost-like figure with orange hair could be vaguely seen. Even if it stood up, there were no signs of life. It was no different from a puppet. There were a number of dense black iron rods inserted all over the body. It looked scary, adding a lot of gloominess and strangeness. It was Pain, and the two figures standing beside him were naturally Konan and Dustless. The construction of the Rain Village cost a lot of money. The money saved in the organization is all used to buy various materials and necessary living materials. Now there is a hole in the capital flow, and a lot of money is needed to fill it. Pain said coldly, due to the previous Second Shinobi World War, the Rain Village has been shattered and disintegrated. As the center of the war between the three major countries, the Rain Village is almost in a miserable state of anarchy, allowing the ninjas of other major countries to wreak havoc. In other words, staring at Dustless and Konan, Pain said faintly, the organization has no money and needs you to perform tasks to earn money. Hearing this, Dustless smiled bitterly. Apart from the missions that they had to do, most of the rest of the time, they were working to earn extra money. What was the mission this time? Shaking his head, Dustless was too lazy to talk nonsense. Remembering Conan's cautiousness when she looked for him, Dustless asked with interest. This mission was obviously unusual. Yomi of the Land of Demons is trying to unlock the seal of Morio, and your two missions are to kill him. His eyes looked indifferently at the void in front of him. Pain said indifferently. His tone was simple and concise. The meaning revealed was that Yomi was no different from a worm, and it was not worth him saying more. As for Morio, Pain's tone was silent. In fact, he had never seen Morio himself, but there were rumors that this prehistoric monster almost destroyed the world in the past. Be careful as much as possible. That Morio is not an ordinary thing. Staring at Conan, Pain said seriously. As for Dustless, he directly ignored him. In his opinion, this kid has a lot of means to escape, especially that exaggerated speed. Worrying about him is better than worrying about whether the Land of Demons has the ability to pay the funds after the completion of the mission. Isn't Morio resurrected 2 years later? Doubts emerged in his heart. Dustless was speechless. He didn't expect that the wind from his butterfly wings was so big that even Morio, a prehistoric monster, came out of the cage 2 years in advance. Since the risk is so great, then why don't we give up this mission? Conan frowned. Although the Akatsuki are desperate, this kind of mission is too dangerous and can be completely rejected. For world peace, we must organize Morio and Yomi. Glancing faintly, Pain's tone was resolute. If Morio is resurrected, the whole world will be unlucky, and the Akatsuki will also be unlucky. You are really great. The corner of his mouth twitched without a trace. Dustless's heart was filled with hundreds of thousands of grass mud horses, and he understood a little more about Uzumaki Nagato's heart. Chapter 217. Pain looked at Dustless calmly, not worried at all about whether Dustless could complete the task. If possible, he really wanted Dustless to die. Dustless gave Pain a very strange feeling. If it was purely strength, it would be fine. The most concerning thing was that this guy's motives and purpose were unknown. He was like a hidden explosive. Even if the masked man sent him, he was still on guard because no one knew when Dustless, this deadly explosive, would explode. This task must be completed. Seeing that the corner of Dustless's mouth was wriggling with a sign of ridicule, Pain immediately gave a death order, not giving Dustless a chance to speak at all. One more thing, if possible, capture the Witch of the Land of Demons. Luan Hui's eyes surged with ferocious light and naked hostility. Pain's sudden order made Xiao Nan and Wu Qin stunned. They looked at each other and could see the surprise in each other's eyes. It turns out that he may value the witch's ability to see through life and death and predict the future. After a moment, Dustless's eyes flashed with understanding. The ability to predict the life and death of others was indeed good. It was normal for Pain to be tempted. Even if he didn't care about his own life and death, he still cared about his close friend Conan very much. He could use Shine's ability to predict the future and eliminate future dangers for Conan in advance. It could be said that he gave a lot of thought. She's a poor person. For the sake of you being used by me for so many years, I will save her life in the future. Looking at the cold Pain with pity, Dustless secretly decided in his heart. It was not difficult to see that Uzumaki Nagato still cared about Conan's life very much, even more than his own life. On the surface, he was indifferent, but in fact, he valued friendship very much. Conan naturally didn't understand why Pain wanted to capture the Witch of the Land of Demons, Cheyenne, but out of trust in Pain, she nodded obediently. She would choose to obey any order made by Uzumaki Nagato unconditionally. Remember to be safe, Conan. It seemed that the enemy this time was different from the past. Pain's isolated voice was a little vivid, giving people a little more warmth. Xiao Nin nodded lightly, and then she turned around and left with Dustless, vanishing into the darkness. Since ancient times, the country of ghosts had always been a mysterious place. This country was passed down from generation to generation by witches who could seal the so-called demonic creatures. They had some kind of unimaginable ability. Looks like this time, it's much more dangerous than any of the previous characters. In the dense forest, two black shadows appeared and disappeared, whistling straight ahead. Their fleeting figures were the epitome of the word speed. Wang Liang is a demonic creature from ancient times. Since it can destroy the world, its strength should be about the same, Dustless said calmly as his gaze fell on Xiaonan. Although there was very little information about the so-called Wang Liang, at least one thing was certain. The Wang Liang was an ultimate monster that had lived for many years, so its strength was naturally not weak. However, it's really strange that those guys from the country of demons would hire Akatsuki. On the contrary, they didn't use the 5 major countries. Shaking his head, Dustless had doubts in his heart. An unprecedented dark cloud shrouded his heart. Today's Akatsuki had a good reputation, but compared to the ninja village of the 5 major countries, whether it was strength or heritage, it was a lot worse. In particular, Konoha village of the 5 major countries and the country of demons had a good relationship for generations. Instead of looking for Konoha's ninja village, they looked for a group of rebellious ninjas. Their motive was really suspicious. Strange, why do I have this feeling? His eyes slightly wrinkled. Dustless's face became gloomy, and his gaze was enough to penetrate the void. His mood was particularly irritable. He always had a feeling that he was being calculated. This feeling that he had never had before made him uncomfortable, and his heart began to shake. Is there something wrong? Noticing the sudden change in Dustless's mood, Conan asked doubtfully. Dustless was the kind of person who rarely showed himself, let alone showing the most direct, irritable expression. He usually gave people a pleasant feeling. Ka. Just as Conan's thoughts were spinning, thinking about the reason for Dustless's anger, the ground suddenly burst open, and countless thick and condensed earth spikes rose from the ground. We haven't even reached the border of the country of demons, and someone is already ambushing us. It seems that old bastard Yomi has spent a lot of painstaking effort. Dustless's pupils suddenly narrowed, and staring at the earth spikes from the ground, he secretly thought. The current journey to the country of demons was still a lot of distance away, and someone had already stopped them, so it was not difficult to guess how many Yama's imps would be waiting for them in the country of demons. Looking at the spikes from the ground without fear, Conan's body was already covered with countless explosive tags. Boom, boom, boom. The explosive tags floating in the sky suddenly burst open, and the blazing flames blew the spikes from the ground into pieces, and in an instant the intensive attack was disintegrated. It seems these 2 people are extremely powerful. The people of Akatsuki organization are really monsters with strength, and that man who has an arrogant look on his face and hasn't made a move is even more unfathomable. The group of 4 secretly observed the situation from afar. Seeing their carefully arranged sneak attack was dismembered in an instant, the heart of all 4 of them was particularly heavy. The man who has an arrogant look on his face and hasn't made a move was naturally Dustless. Leave it to me. I want to see what ability that man has. Another person of the group of 4 opened her mouth and said. Her voice was cold, obviously belonged to a woman, and faintly there was disdain in her voice. She didn't believe that these 2 people before her eyes were so strong, especially opposite party had actually sent 2 people. This was really the best provocation and disdain. Want to see what ability I have? Then I will fulfill your wish. An ice-cold voice came from behind the group of 4, followed by an intense killing intent coming from behind. The boiling, killing intent made their soul boil, and it was abnormally difficult to breathe, and they were filled with suffocating feeling. What came into view was the indifferent face of Dustless, who had an arrogant look on his face. Chapter 218. The group of men and women turned their heads to look at Dustless. Their faces were full of horror, and they unconsciously gasped for breath. But the air around them was flowing straight, and there was only endless coldness and direct killing intent. One after another, they stared at Wu Chun, whose pupils were emitting dim light in horror. Their throats twitched unconsciously, and the invisible sense of oppression almost made them collapse mentally. Perhaps the thin man in front of them only needed to exert a little force to kill them. When did this guy? How could a normal human have this kind of high-level ninjutsu to hide his aura? The handsome man, who was obviously the leader of the group of four, said incredulously. He looked at the expressionless Wu Chan in astonishment. His face was lifeless. You are the subordinates of Yomi. The evil chakra in your body was also given to you by him. Staring at the group of four in front of him, Dustless suppressed his voice and asked, and his tone was full of killing intent. Dustless could clearly feel the evil chakra in the group of four in front of him, and the negative emotions of hatred were hidden under their skin. You dare to ambush me, but you have to pay a price for everything. The four people in front of him were all loyal subordinates of Yomi. As long as one of them was left alive, he could use the eye power of Rinnegan to extract their memory. The vast chakra surged out of his body, and Dustless suddenly burst out and rushed straight toward the group of four. Earth release, earth flow wall. The burly man saw that Dustless disappeared, and he couldn't perceive his movements, so he simply cast a perfect defensive rock wall in the 360-degree range of the four to resist Dustless's attack. Child's play. Dustless sneered at the semicircular rock wall defense, and suddenly a golden light flashed from his palm, and the light gathered at the tip of his finger, shot out, and rushed straight toward the group of four. Boom! A hole was suddenly blasted in the solid rock wall, and the sun shone in. Before the burly man could react, a dark shadow covered the sky, and he looked up and saw Dustless with a cold face. The straight blade light directly burned his eyes. Poochie! The golden light swept across, and the enchanting snowflakes sprinkled all over the void, splashing all over the ground. The strong smell of blood filled the narrow area. Wu Chan casually cut the burly man in half and immediately whistled out like lightning, galloping towards the other two figures. Poochie! Poochie! The other two were also ruthlessly penetrated by the golden light, and their bodies were divided into two parts. Their fate was tragic, and their eyes were still open in horror. Obviously, they were killed by surprise, and they didn't even have time to realize that they were ruthlessly erased. Now you're left. Kuzunagi's sword flashed with a faint light, lost its texture, and slowly disappeared. His left eye also turned into Rinsei Sharingan, and he sneered at the last person of the group of four and instantly appeared beside him as if he was traveling through space. His hand tightly pressed on his head and used the ability of Rinsei Sharingan to read the memory in his body. It seems that Yomi and Morio have merged into one. That old man is quite bold. After carefully reading his memory, Dustless's voice rose a lot, and he couldn't help but sweat for Yomi's madness. Morio was the typical type of monster that ate people without spitting out the bones, but that old man didn't hesitate to let Morio enter his body. This kind of courage to face death, Dustless really admired. Boom! After reading the memory of Yomi's subordinate, Dustless threw him aside and let him fend for himself. There was no need to waste time on such a small pawn. In the blink of an eye, he caught up with Conan. Be careful. Yomi has merged with Morio and can control a large number of ghost army. The strength of a large number of terracotta soldiers may not be enough to pay attention to, but the number is very amazing. Dustless, who was beside Conan, said seriously and cautiously, those large number of undead army should not be underestimated. In such a short time, you have inquired about such important information? Conan looked at Dustless in surprise. One must know that he had left for less than 10 minutes, and unexpectedly he had inquired about the enemy's information in such detail. Perhaps even the Akatsuki organization's best at inquiring about information couldn't do it. Just a small trick. Dustless smiled indifferently. The ability of Rinsei Sharingan was indeed very convenient. It could extract the memory of the other party, and there was no way to hide the information. First use that which called Cheyenne to seal Morio again, and then we will kidnap him. After a little calculation in his heart, Dustless suddenly decided. Morio seemed to be the incarnation of evil. So far there was no way to directly kill him, so only a powerful sealing technique could be used to seal him. That's the best. Conan nodded. Her beautiful eyes turned around Dustless, and from time to time a complex color flashed in her eyes, which was a great contrast to her usual cold and aloof snow lotus. Unfortunately, Dustless didn't notice this scene. Soon, the sky turned gloomy. The howling cold wind wreaked havoc on the earth. The pitch-black night sky dyed everything in the world a rich black color. Dustless and Conan also arrived at the destination in time. Fortunately, we didn't come late. Otherwise, that which would thank us for freeing her. The densely packed terracotta soldiers were rushing towards the palace of the country of ghosts. The guards who came to stop them were killed until their blood flowed like a river. Looking around, the entire palace was filled with the corpses of the dead. In the face of these thick-skinned terracotta soldiers, they could only passively take a beating. Conan, staring at the undead army in front of him, Dustless's pupils slightly narrowed, and the light emitted from his eyes was extremely dangerous, and his strong and powerful arm grabbed Conan's soft hand. An electric shock like numbness suddenly spread all over her body, and her face was filled with panic. When she was about to shake off Dustless, a golden halo covered both of them. Kinsusanu. Chapter 219. The golden chakra wrapped Dustless and Conan tightly like an iron bucket, facing the densely packed undead army in front of them. They went straight ahead. In the dark night sky, only the golden light beam could be seen, and with its powerful brute force, it went through the undead army and landed at the gate of the palace of the land of demons, creating a long and narrow crack on the ground. Along the way, the undead terracotta soldiers that came in contact with Kinsusanu exploded as if they met their natural enemy, and they were easily crushed into pieces. Is it the Akatsuki of the Rain Village? Leave it to us. Miko-sama is in the palace. A group of guards rushed over, and after seeing Dustless and Conan's red cloud cloak, they were relieved, and at the same time, they were lined up side by side with bows and arrows. Apparently, they were going to fight this group of undead army. Your courage is really commendable, but fighting with this group of statues is really stupid. Feeling the determination of these guards, Dustless was deeply moved and immediately went to the front. The boiling hot chakra began to erupt. Let me give you a hand. His cold eyes swept through the dense, undead army. Dustless's body tightened, and the hot chakra continued to erupt. Looking at Conan beside him, he secretly smacked his lips. Uchiha flame formation. The crimson boundary of fire gushed out from the depths of the ground. It covered a wide range and was as powerful as an insurmountable moat. It blocked the undead army and burned all the puppets that tried to break the boundary. So powerful. Is this a ninja? Sure enough, we ancient samurai can't compare with them. Nonsense. I heard that they spent a lot of money to hire ninjas. They are definitely stronger than us. The undead army that was previously killing them was stopped, and the samurai who were at death's door instantly cheered, and all of them roared to the sky, venting their inner joy. Just as he was about to thank Dustless, he and Xiao Nen had already disappeared. Brat, don't waste our time. Hurry up and come out. Don't think that I won't beat you up just because you're a witch. In the empty hall, Dustless and Xiao Nen stared at the young girl behind the gauze curtain with furrowed brows. This little girl clearly treated Dustless and Xiao Nen as if they were invisible. Dustless immediately threatened her. There was no doubt that this girl was the witch Ziyuan. Don't be so rude. Looking at Dustless with dissatisfaction, Xiao Nen frowned and said unhappily. Dustless was obviously a teenager. Even if she was a witch, she was still a child. Children always needed a transition period to become adults. I'm rude. Let me tell you, that brat is even more rude than me. Rolling his eyes, Dustless stared at Xiao Nen angrily. He knew that this little girl named Ziyuan was a very tiger type. She had all kinds of arrogant attributes. It could be said that she was wild and willful. Xiao Nen ignored Dustless and walked straight behind the gauze curtain. The girl that came into view was quite quiet. Her facial features were beautiful and refined. She was wearing a witch's costume. She was quietly kneeling on the tatami with a serene expression. She gave people the feeling of a blooming lotus, very elegant. Xiao Nen frowned when she saw this. She was obviously a very quiet little girl. How could she be as fierce as Dustless said? The corner of Dustless's mouth twitched fiercely. He was speechless and depressed. The corners of his mouth moved, but he remained silent. Facts speak louder than words. She really didn't look like a spoiled and willful young lady. Ninja of the Rain Village, your work efficiency is very good. Cheyenne's voice was very soft. She raised her eyes to look at Xiao Nan and nodded. Then she looked at Dustless. After a moment of silence, her words almost made Dustless vomit blood. He couldn't wait to slap this little girl to death. You may die, or you may not die. It's really strange. A person like you who is full of bad luck should look like the kind of person who will die early. Cheyenne muttered to herself in surprise. It was the first time that she had seen this kind of fate. It hovered between life and death. It was neither dead nor alive. Huh. Xiaonan couldn't help but laugh. Her laughter was like a blooming flower, fresh and moving. It was particularly attractive. She didn't care about Dustless, whose face was like a black pot. Her smile was like a beautiful woman, but it gave people a feeling of gloating. Amir Morio wants me to die? Little girl, your idea is too naive and ridiculous. Dustless looked at Cheyenne with a sneer. To be honest, he really didn't care about this bullshit prophecy. It was not that Dustless was conceited. If Morio could really kill him, this world was likely to be ruled by monsters from another world hundreds of years ago. Believe it or not, I have no right to interfere. By the way, if you don't want to die, stay away from me. I have never failed in my prophecy in my life. Dustless frowned slightly when he heard this. It was not that he doubted the authenticity of Cheyenne's words. If the enemy was someone else, they might be able to kill him, but Morio was obviously not on the same level as him. Forget it. I'll take one step at a time. I want to see who he is. Wuchen thought coldly. A sinister light flashed across his eyes. Dustless only felt that this boring trip suddenly became interesting and lively. It's better to go to the ancestral hall of the swamp country as soon as possible to seal Morio, Xiaonan said softly. Morio was not an ordinary creature. Since it could be said that he could destroy the world, it might be an exaggeration, but it also showed the fear that Morio gave the world. Let's set off as soon as possible. Dustless nodded in agreement, but his mind had already flown to the horizon. He secretly wondered who in this world could force him to the end of his life. Kagaya Otsutsuki, Sanin Six Paths, and Hamira Otsutsuki. These people were obviously impossible. Kagaya Otsutsuki had been sealed, and her 2 sons had died, so it was naturally impossible. Everything was still a mystery. Chapter 220. Conan's calm eyes looked at the situation outside, and her delicate little face revealed a cautious expression. The strength of these undead army may be very ordinary, but their number was extremely huge. The densely packed terracotta army displayed the meaning of a human wave tactic to the extreme. Is there any other way to the land of ghosts? Conan retracted her gaze and stared at Shine's face with a slightly heavy expression. There is a tunnel leading to the outside world where the witch meditates. Shine nodded and said, everyone knew the principle of preparing for a rainy day. The land of ghosts had long since built a secret escape tunnel in case of an accident. Conan heaved a sigh of relief. These undead army were all undead, puppet-like existences, and there were countless of them. Tunnel, if you don't want to walk on the main road, why do you want to drill a dog hole? A calm voice resounded, and the tone was very dull and natural. Then Wu Chun walked out of the main hall, and suddenly a cold gust of wind came out of the main hall, brushing his body. His hair and Akatsuki's clothes were blown up by the wind. Wu Chen's figure belonged to the slender type. Now that he was facing the strong wind, coupled with his pale face and messy hair that danced in the wind, he gave people a feeling that he was exceptionally fragile. It was as if he would be annihilated and swallowed by the bone-piercing cold wind at any time. Humph! What a big-tailed wolf! You will cry later, and at that time, won't you have to obediently drill a dog hole? The young girl, Cheyenne, angrily glared at Dustless, and her small face was full of indignation. The huge project that her ancestors spent decades to build was turned into a dog hole by Dustless, so how could she not be angry? Don't worry about him. He is such a person. Conan looked at Dustless and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She slightly shook her head, and then her eyes shone brightly. She knew Dustless's temperament very well, and she knew that Dustless was not the kind of person who spoke without thinking. If he could do it, he could do it, and he would never talk nonsense. Do you trust him that much? This stinky man has a disgusting salted fish smell all over his body. She glared at Xiao Nan with dissatisfaction. Although Xiao Nan did not show it, Ziyuan could see that Xiao Nan actually trusted Dustless very much. Ziyuan stared at Xiao Nan and seemed to understand something. She muttered in a dissatisfied voice, "It's a pity that such a good cabbage will be eaten by a pig." Even though Ziyuan's voice was very low, Xiao Nan, who was beside her, still heard every word clearly. "This child is really as mischievous as Dustless said." The corner of Xiao Nan's mouth twitched uncontrollably. She felt even more conflicted, but she could only smile and let it go. She finally understood that the witch in front of her was a mischievous type. The other party was just a teenage girl. Even if she did it on purpose, she couldn't kill her directly. Dustless seemed to have heard the conversation between Xiao Nan and Ziyuan. He suddenly turned his head, revealing the scarlet eternal kaleidoscope. Gulp! Ziyuan unconsciously swallowed a breath. The moment Dustless turned his head, especially when his crimson eyes swept past her body, she felt as if her soul had collapsed. It was as if she was being stared at by a hungry, prehistoric beast. She couldn't help but have goosebumps all over her body. A mere puppet wants to shake the world. A half-baked like you wants to rule the world and establish a 1,000-year-old empire. There is nothing more ridiculous than this. Dustless calmly stared at the terracotta soldiers coming from all directions. The contempt in his eyes was obvious, and the momentum of his whole body began to soar. The scarlet eternal kaleidoscope shot out an unparalleled fluctuation of eye power. Is it an illusion? The violent eye power made Xiao Nan's voice stop. It was as if she had come to a world of illusion. The world in her eyes was invisibly covered with red clouds, looming and surrounded by a faint blood mist. It was impossible to touch. The whole world was shrouded in this ominous bloodlight. In the haze, the golden luster passed through the heavy blood mist. It was particularly dazzling, and it pulled Xiao Nan, who was immersed in it, out of it. It's so big. Ziyuan looked at the golden giant outside the palace in astonishment. She wiped the saliva from the corner of her mouth with her small hand. The huge body, which was dozens of meters tall, almost covered the entire sky. The golden afterglow sprinkled all over the void, and the dark night was like day. Looking up, it was Dustless's ultimate body, Kinsusanu. The huge golden giant was wearing a heavy samurai suit. It had 2 heads and 4 arms. There were 2 golden long swords at its waist, and it was wearing a ferocious Tengu armor. Its crimson eyes were full of evil, and its momentum was unusually ferocious. It made people unable to raise the heart to resist. As long as it glanced at you, you would feel as if there was a knife on your back. It's much bigger than a few years ago. Recalling the golden giant when she fought with Dustless a few years ago, Xiao Nan thought to herself. There was an obvious difference between the Kinsusanu in front of her and the one in the past. Clang! An ear-piercing roar sounded, and the endless void was invisibly covered with a layer of dark clouds. Looking up, Kinsusanu suddenly pulled out the tachi hanging at its waist. The straight tachi covered the earth like a guillotine. I'm afraid you'll have to rebuild the palace. Xiao Nan looked at the tachi in the hands of the ultimate body, Kinsusanu, speechless. She had seen Kinsusanu before, so she understood the horror of Kinsusanu. It didn't take much strength. It only needed a light slash, and the palace of the country of ghosts would completely collapse. She was afraid that the amount of money from this mission might not be enough to compensate the country of ghosts. It was not impossible for them to pay for it. Is it that exaggerated? Ziyuan curled her lips in disdain. Although this giant was extraordinary and frighteningly big, the palace of the country of ghosts covered a vast area. All of you disappear. With a ferocious roar, The ultimate form, Susanu's katana of light, slashed down, and the tip of the katana suddenly blasted out an incomparably thick wave of destruction. The tyrannical force that could destroy all things was like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. The solid and hard ground seemed to be torn apart by bare hands, and the narrow and long cracks extended to the scale of tens of kilometers. The sand dunes in the distance collapsed and exploded. The scattered dust fell to the ground like fine snow. Thousands of undead soldiers, including the palace of the country of ghosts, were all buried under the light of the ultimate body, Kinsusanu's Tachi of light. Chapter 2:21. Both Ziyuan and Xiaonan stare at the long and narrow crack with their mouths agape. The hideous wound was exposed to the air and would never disappear. It was not an exaggeration to say that the ditch on the ground, which was dozens of kilometers long, was the masterpiece of God. It's an honor for you puppets to be destroyed by Kinsusanu. Seeing that all the terracotta figures have been cleared, Dustless removed Kinsusanu, which was dozens of meters high, and landed directly beside Xiao, Nan, and Ziyuan. You bastard! Are you here to protect me, or to seize the country of ghosts? Glaring at Dustless angrily, Ziyuan's face was livid, and she almost spat out fire. Looking around, the palace of the country of ghosts, which had countless years of history, was flattened by Dustless with a single strike. This was simply murdering for money and trying to seize the country of ghosts. Idiot! Even if I didn't destroy these buildings, those puppets would still destroy them mercilessly. Glancing at Ziyuan with pity, Dustless said mercilessly. This was an undeniable fact. Acheron had a deep-rooted hatred for the country of ghosts. He would definitely order his puppets to completely trample the country of ghosts to the ground. You mean to say that it's better for you to take advantage of them? Ziyuan instantly understood what Dustless meant. She was so angry that she laughed and asked. She wanted to beat Dustless's calm face into a pig's head. The meaning shown on his face was obviously saying that what he had just done was not worth mentioning. This is the truth. Glancing at Ziyuan expressionlessly, Dustless was too lazy to talk nonsense and walked straight out of the palace. It was well known that Acheron was ruthless. This little girl named Ziyuan obviously knew what he meant. She was just pestering him endlessly. Watching Dustless's back gradually disappear, Xiaonan pulled Ziyuan and followed him. He's right, Ziyuan. As if afraid that Ziyuan would be sad, Xiaonan comforted her softly. After all, she was still a little girl. It was inevitable that it would be difficult for her to accept the destruction of the home she had lived in for more than 10 years. I'm not as weak as you think. I just don't like that guy. Ziyuan was not an insensible person. In fact, as Dustless said, even if they left like this, Huang Quan would not let the land of ghosts go unscathed. Everything in the palace would be ruthlessly destroyed by him. That would be best. Hearing this, Xiaonan nodded slightly. She pulled Ziyuan and also disappeared into the dark night sky, leaving only the straight crack that stretched for dozens of kilometers. The next morning, the morning breeze blew and the sun shone brightly. The three figures leisurely shuttled through the dense forest, strolling and enjoying the fresh morning air. Their expressions were quite leisurely, as if they were leisurely taking a stroll after breakfast. Is this really okay? We're doing a Super S mission. Seeing that Dustless and Ziyuan were so lazy, Xiaonan spoke uneasily and reminded them of the current level of the mission. Last night, Ziyuan had complained that she wanted to sleep. Xiaonan had hoped that Dustless would scare this unruly little girl. Unexpectedly, Dustless agreed unexpectedly. Moreover, he was the one who wanted to sleep the most. In fact, several groups of invaders had been secretly dealt with by Dustless last night. Xiaonan and Ziyuan had not found out. There's no need to care about Xiaonan. The destination is close at hand. Staring at the cave in the distance, Dustless's thoughts were running fast. He could even feel the mysterious creatures in the cave, and he could clearly sense the violent and evil negative emotions on them. The evil concentration of this chakra is not weaker than that of the tailed beasts, but there is an essential difference. These monsters of different worlds don't seem to be from this world. Perceiving the difference between chakra and chakra, Dustless frowned. In recent years, he had been dealing with tailed beasts every day, so he naturally knew the details of tailed beasts. After all, the chakra of tailed beasts came from the Jubi, including the huge chakra in Dustless's body. The origin of this beast is different. His chakra seems to have nothing to do with the Jubi. With a strong light in his eyes, Dustless's breathing was a little excited. He originally thought that the so-called Wangliang was just a collection of human negative emotions, but now it seems that he was thinking too much. Maybe there will be an unexpected harvest. With a smile on his face, Dustless's eyes lit up. He didn't know how old the Wangliang was. The monster that existed countless years ago definitely knew some unknown ancient secret history. I can use Rinnegan to extract his memory. After making a decision in his heart, Dustless's eyes lit up. Ka. The sound of the ground breaking suddenly sounded, and the dust under their feet immediately floated into the air, dragging Dustless and others straight into the cave ahead. This guy's ability is really strange. It seems to be similar to Pain's gravity control. Conan said to herself incredulously, staring at the ground under her feet. She couldn't help but take a deep breath. This was the first time she saw Dustless use gravity. Why didn't you say earlier that you can fly? Ziyuan stared at Dustless in front of her, and she was particularly depressed. She was not a ninja, so naturally, she couldn't stand such a long journey. Although she had received a lot of training as a Miko, she still couldn't bear it and was physically and mentally exhausted. Ka. The ground collapsed, and countless terracotta figures poured out of the ground in a neat arrangement. They held sharp swords in their hands, expressionless, and walked in neat steps. Every time they walked, the ground would tremble. The violent tremor spread to the distance, and the whole earth would tremble slightly. The momentum was shocking. Although these terracotta figures belong to the small hill, their number is frightening. Ninjas are easy to deal with, but they are indeed natural enemies for weak human beings. Dustless nodded secretly. With such an army, it was not difficult to conquer the world. Conan looked at the terracotta army below with a blank face, and there were traces of wrinkles on her body, and the number of explosive charms was far denser than the terracotta figures. Her beautiful eyes narrowed slightly, and Conan also showed her ferocious side as a woman. Holy Origami Technique. Chapter 222. The explosive charms all over the sky slowly descended, as light and powerless as snow, drifting into the distance with the wind, covering all the terracotta figures on the ground. You are really cold and ruthless, Conan. Dustless took a deep breath and looked at Conan speechlessly. He couldn't help but have goosebumps all over his body. He suddenly thought of Yuro Otsutsuki. Some women were usually gentle and soft, but once they became fierce, boom, 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 endless explosions suddenly rang out, and the power of countless explosive charms connected to each other was enough to destroy the world. The surging hot air waves directly swallowed the world. This crazy woman. The corner of Dustless's mouth twitched fiercely, and he quickly released the local Kinsusinu to protect the mobile platform under his feet to defend against the impact of the airwaves below. Bang, bang, bang. Even though he activated the local Kinsusinu to defend himself, Dustless and the other two were still swallowed by the shockwave. Even the local Kinsusinu showed some slight traces. Fortunately, Dustless repaired it in time. Otherwise, it might also be swallowed by the explosive charms. Even under the protection of the local Kinsusinu, the strong vibration still made Dustless and the others feel dizzy, and their minds kept roaring. The terrifying explosion lasted for a few minutes before it stopped. The ground below was even more tragic. The dense terracotta figures were erased, and the earth was torn in half by the brutal force. The moist soil deep underground was brutally turned up and exposed to the erosion of the sun. All the materials within several kilometers were annihilated. Looking down from the sky, what came into view was an unprecedented huge pit, as if it had been hit by the Super Shinra Tensei head-on, and everything in the world was destroyed. Do you want to kill us all? Looking at Conan angrily, Dustless said with dissatisfaction, If it weren't for Consuso, maybe we would have been killed by you, Conan. Yes, you have to take responsibility. Zien, who didn't get along with Dustless, was also very resentful. She was the weakest among the three of them. When she was swallowed by the airwave just now, she swayed around like a roly-poly toy. So that's where the Wangliang is. It really does feel like a tailed beast. Ignoring Zien, who was about to complain, Xiaonan looked straight at the entrance of the cave in front of her. A faint ripple appeared in her eyes, and Xiaonan was a little surprised. The lava cave where the Wangliang was sealed was also very strange. It seemed to be protected by some kind of special energy. Even when it was hit by the explosive talisman, it was still safe and sound. You'll know if it's a mule or a horse when it comes out for a walk. Dustless chuckled. At the same time, he controlled the floating platform to land on the ground. After exchanging glances, the three of them jumped down and walked straight into the eerie interior of the cave. In the depths of the pitch-black darkness, one could not even see one's own fingers. It was filled with oppression and fear. Ziyuan seemed to have never seen such a terrifying environment before. She seemed to have heard the screams of ghosts. Fear and hesitation appeared in her eyes, and her footsteps stopped. Don't be afraid. The Wangliang is sealed. Dustless gave Ziyuan an encouraging look and said softly. There was a rare gentleness in his tone. Right now, Ziyuan was just a little girl in her teens. It was normal for her to be afraid. Xiaonan also patted Ziyuan on the shoulder, indicating that she didn't need to worry. The Wangliang was at most at the same level as a tailed beast. Although its ability was strange and evil, it wouldn't cause any trouble for her and Dustless. Ziyuan nodded obediently and followed. As they went deeper and deeper, the temperature gradually increased. It was as hot as hell, making it difficult for them to adapt. Fortunately, Dustless and Xiaonan were not mortals. Although Ziyuan was a little ordinary, she was also a witch who had received a lot of training. She could still resist this kind of heat. Soon, the Crimson World came into view. The environment in the cave was quite spacious. The lava was scattered everywhere, and the crimson light could melt and erode any substance. If one fell in, they would definitely die. Looking up, they could clearly see the middle-aged man with black runes on his face. Boom! 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 At this moment, the ground outside the cave shook, and the range continued to expand. The dense undead army once again emerged from the ground like ghosts. Leave it to me. Frowning slightly, Dustless, who noticed the unusual vibration outside the cave, looked at Xiaonan and signaled her to block the undead army outside. Then he grabbed Ziyuan's small arm, and in the blink of an eye, they crossed the layers of lava and landed in front of Yomi. Seeing this, Xiaonan also left and went out to fight the terracotta army composed of puppets. The strength of this ninja seems to be strong. Just now, I couldn't catch his movement trajectory. Is it a rare space ninja? Yomi's frown disappeared in a flash. Staring at the indifferent face of Dustless, he suddenly became alert. This man gave him the feeling of a ferocious beast hiding in the deep sea, unfathomable. The evil energy fluctuation seems to be similar to that of Morio, but there is obviously a dimensional gap. I'm afraid it's just a possessed puppet. In that case, let's let your body come out to breathe first, and then extract your memory. The cold light in his eyes disappeared in a flash. Dustless suddenly made a decision in his heart. He closed his eyes and left the rest to the little girl Ziyuan. Your courage is not small. Even your current Mithria doesn't dare to approach me like this. The new generation replaces the old. Staring gloomily at Ziyuan, who is 80% similar to Mithria, Yomi praised in a hoarse voice. He seemed to appreciate Ziyuan's courage. A mere insect dares to boast shamelessly, ridiculous. Raising his eyelids and revealing a sarcastic smile, Dustless said disdainfully in his heart. He looked indifferently at Yomi or Morio, who possessed him. It seems that he still hasn't figured out who is the hunter. I'm going to seal you now. Ziyuan was obviously too lazy to talk nonsense with him. She made a hand gesture that had never been seen before. After completing the hand gesture, the ground suddenly shone with a purple luster. A square-shaped enchantment enveloped Huang Quan, Wang Liang, Wu Chen, and Ziyuan, completely sealing them. As if seeing the end of Dustless and Ziyuan, Morio's rampant voice resounded in the cave. Chapter 223. As the square enchantment surged up, purple-black evil chakra suddenly rushed out from Netherworld's body. The density was completely different from before. Kiki, Kiki, you are about to be crushed to death by fate. I will devour you both later. Eerie and terrifying laughter came from Netherworld's body. An extremely thick black beam of light erupted from the top of his head. It felt like the evil wanted to devour everything. Even Dustless frowned, and his heart was full of doubts and puzzlement. This guy must have a strong background. Dustless's pupils shot out a sharp light. His eyes were locked on the purple mist, and at the same time, he raised his hand and shot out a golden beam of light. Laser! The straight beam of light pierced through the black mist and went straight through it. However, this strange black mist seemed to be elemental and was directly immune to Dustless's attack. The square purple enchantment left a burning mark. Kiki, a gloomy and sarcastic voice came out from the black mist. At the same time, Netherworld's body seemed to be melting. The skin on his body began to peel off like a wrinkled paper. With a gentle pull, the surface layer of his skin would be peeled off. How is this possible? It's not sealing you. Ziyuan looked at the black mist in horror. Her whole body was cold. The power in front of her did not look like Wang Liang's seal at all. Instead, Wang Liang, who was covered in evil chakra, was completely liberated. You don't have to be so surprised, as it's strange. In fact, we have the same physical body. To some extent, the so-called seal is to reunite the two into one. As for consciousness, of course, it is the person who occupies the dominant position in the body. What determines all of this is naturally the amount of chakra, Wang Liang said in a gloomy tone. Every time he said a word, the black mist became stronger and more stable. The frightened Ziyuan instinctively ran to Dustless's side. She hugged Dustless with both hands, and tears appeared in her eyes. Obviously, she also knew that she had released Wang Liang, and he wanted to devour her. Even if Ziyuan's chakra is not as good as yours, a worm like you can forget about occupying her body. Dustless said expressionlessly as he calmly looked at the black ball of light. His calm voice was exceptionally confident, causing Ziyuan's restless heart to slowly calm down. She stared at Dustless with her watery eyes. She had never felt that the man in front of her could be so reliable. She hugged Dustless more tightly. On the other hand, the corners of Dustless's mouth curled up as he sneered at the ball of black light. His calm face suddenly twisted, and his deep eyes shot out a vicious aura. Dustless's murderous aura spread out like a tide, directly bursting the purple square barrier. He said coldly, "Instead, I see you being torn into pieces. Brat, you're courting death." Wang Liang was enraged when he heard this. Even the black mass was trembling with anger. The strong all had their own pride. Now that he was being treated like an ant by a nobody, how could he not be angry? Ka. The solid ground suddenly burst open, and several purple tentacles rose from the ground. Their ferocious fangs tore at Dustless, and their scarlet eyes were extremely ferocious. Boring. Raising his eyelids, Dustless stared at the ferocious mouth without fear. His thin body shone with a dazzling brilliance. His whole body was swallowed by the golden light, and immediately a straight ray of light shot straight up. A warm luster flashed from Dustless's palm, covering an extremely wide area, almost covering the entire cave. Wang Liang has broken the seal, so there is no need for this cave to exist. His pupils slowly shrank, and the gaze that shot out was particularly cold. He looked at the purple-black monster in the depths of the ground and mercilessly sentenced Wang Liang to death, sending him to the 18th level of hell. The coldness in the cave penetrated deep into the bone marrow and did not dissipate for a long time. This is the place of your new life, and also the place of your death. It is really suitable. Yasakani no Magatama. The brilliance in the palm of his hand was thrown out, and like raindrops, it burst open and turned into millions of rays of light whizzing down. The dense number of rays of light filled the dark void, and the dark interior of the cave was dyed golden. Pucci, the monster in the depths of the ground that was about to raise its head, was directly, ruthlessly suppressed. The force formed by the golden light was like a scythe that easily killed these snake-like monsters. The cave could not withstand the attack of the light bomb, and began to collapse rapidly. Large and small rocks were quickly peeled off, obviously unable to withstand the force just now, and the entire cave began to collapse. Shinra Tensei. The repulsion force broke out, and the falling rocks were bounced away. Dustless's gaze was deep, and seeing that the entrance of the cave was completely blocked, chakra began to go berserk. Silver wheel reincarnation explosion. Boom, boom, boom. In the blink of an eye, the enormous long wand foam crushed the cave and razed it to the ground. If it was said that Wu Chun was just fooling around before, now it was completely serious. The huge mountain was instantly destroyed, and the Immortal's cave that had not seen the light of day all year round was exposed to the sunlight. You are quite shameless. Holding Cheyenne in the void, Dustless spread out his perception in all directions. He noticed that the Morio was not dead yet, and frowned slightly. He subconsciously looked at the purple pearl on Shine's body. It seemed that only by combining the power of the two could the Morio be killed. It's good that you're not dead, as long as I can extract your memory to find out the answer I want to know. With a cold smile on his face, Dustless secretly decided, and at the same time, he used gravity to safely send Cheyenne to the ground. This little girl was also smart. She knew that if she stayed with Dustless, she would be a hindrance, so she quickly fled into the distance. Ayo, ayo, ayo. The angry roar resounded through the sky, and the evil black chakra soared into the sky. The hysterical voice was full of endless killing intent and madness. There was no doubt that Dustless's series of attacks just now must have hurt him. It seems that you are still not convinced. The contemptuous smile became more obvious. Dustless's pupils rapidly turned, and the surging and abnormally powerful power shot out. His dark red eyes stared at the huge body of the Morio, and a faint black flame flashed in his eyes. Amaterasu. Chapter 2:24. His purple-black body was covered in blazing flames, and the dark Amaterasu was like a flame from hell, and the moment it appeared, it swallowed Morio's entire body. Morio shook his body vigorously, and the dark chakra surged all over his body, and the surface of his skin accumulated a chakra defense wall, trying to reduce the erosion of his body by the Amaterasu. However, the pain seemed to be alleviated, and the cries of pain also stopped. Treating the symptoms, but not the root cause, temporarily relieving the pain, will still be swallowed. Quietly looking at the dark chakra on the surface of Morio's skin, Dustless sneered. Even so, the Amaterasu was still crazily swallowing the dark chakra, and Morio was constantly releasing chakra to resist, and the result was self-evident. Looking at Dustless in the sky with his blood-red eyes, Morio suggested in a hoarse voice, "Human, why don't we join forces? If we form an alliance, the whole world will be easy for us." Suppressing the anger and monstrous killing intent in his heart, Morio chose to compromise. As long as there is life, there is hope. This truth was not only understood by humans, but he also understood it, and even understood it better than humans. Temporary submission may allow him to turn the situation around, but resistance now will only lead to death, and the first one to consume the chakra will be himself. This tentacle monster also knows how to be flexible. Staring at Morio being swallowed by the Amaterasu, Dustless was quite surprised. Morio in front of him was much more cunning than the tailed beast, and he knew how to surrender to reality. But the will of the incarnation of resentment. You are not qualified to cooperate with me, and now you are just a fish on the chopping board, and I am the one who is about to slaughter you. Ridiculing Morio with disdain, Dustless said straightforwardly, "It is not impossible to cooperate with him, but at least Uchiha Madara is powerful, or someone who is valuable to him. Morio in front of him does not meet this condition." "Are you sure? I can tell you some secrets of the ancient times." Morio's voice was low, and there was endless temptation in his tone, and people with a slightly weak will may be addicted to it and be played by Morio. "Don't doubt what I said. I am an ancient existence who has lived in the world for countless years, the incarnation of the root of all evil human beings. As long as the evil thoughts of human beings don't stop, I will exist forever." Morio was afraid of Dustless's suspicion. He answered truthfully, trying to increase his bargaining chip, and his tone triumphant. "As long as negative emotions such as resentment and hatred exist, he will not die. Eternal and indestructible? You really dare to say that?" The sneer at the corner of Wuchen's mouth was even more obvious. He still remembered that even if he didn't suddenly appear and disturb the situation, Morio would be killed by the fusion of Uzumaki Naruto and Shine Yuan in the future. It was ridiculous to say that he was immortal. Morio, Dustless Morio's voice, Morio, and Morio I. Resolutely rejecting Morio's cooperation, Dustless sneered. "This guy obviously belongs to the Cunning Hill, and cooperating with such a monster is boring and unnecessary, and the effect is minimal. In that case, then go to hell, stupid human being who doesn't know what's good for you." It seems that Dustless will refuse his proposal. Morio directly attacked. The tentacles hidden in the dark opened their sharp mouths full of fangs and sprayed a black mist, attacking Dustless from all directions. Boring, no matter how you attack. The gap between the two sides is difficult to make up for. Dustless looked at the beasts attacking from all directions without fear, and the cold light condensed in his eyes, and the cold, killing intent turned into a majestic, repulsive force, scattering in all directions. Shinra Tensei. The irresistible, repulsive waves spread out, and the void stirred up waves of ripples, swallowing the tentacles that came to bite, and simply disappeared. Ayo, ayo, ayo. At the same time, Morio's angry roar pulled Dustless's attention back, and saw that its big mouth was burning with a black, evil light, jumping with a dark luster, like a Baijidama, filled with a strong sense of destruction. His gaze fell on the ground under Morio's feet, and his pupils flashed with a hint of ridicule. Mokutan, with a strong vitality, chakra surged in Dustless's body, and the ground under Morio's feet suddenly burst open, and countless thick trees like pipes inserted into his body, crazily swallowing the boundless chakra in Morio's body. Perhaps because Morio's chakra was too evil, the Mokutan that swallowed him was dyed black, and even the surface of the trees was covered with disgusting black water droplets. "My chakra! Don't absorb my chakra!" Morio suddenly panicked when he realized that the Mokutan had penetrated deep into his body and was swallowing his chakra without limit, and his tone was filled with the intention of begging for mercy. However, Dustless's face was cold, and he directly ignored him. At the same time, due to the absorption of chakra by the Mokutan, Morio's chakra rapidly decreased, and the Amaterasu that was previously blocked by chakra suddenly swallowed him up, and suddenly a miserable scream came out from his huge mouth that was full of fangs. The hysterical scream resounded through the sky, and the horrifying scream made people retreat, not daring to get close. As time slowly passed, Morio's scream became softer and softer, and his huge body was also swallowed up by the Amaterasu, leaving only a small body, and then it turned back into the appearance of Nether, and was dying. Of course, this was the result of Dustless deliberately leaving a backup plan. "I'm going to take away your memory now, idiot." With a smile, he landed beside Morio, and his left eye suddenly turned into the reincarnation Sharingan. He grabbed Morio's head with one hand, and from the palm of his hand came out an entered Morio's mind to search his memory. This guy is really an antique. Narrowing his eyes, Dustless carefully went through the memories in Morio's mind, and shockingly found out that Morio's history could be traced back to thousands of years ago, and even when Kagaya released the infinite Tsukimi to bring the whole world into the world of nightmares, this old man was still alive, and he used some unknown method to live a carefree life. It was a plan to catch the bijou. In addition to the Jinchuriki of each village, most of the bijou are inside the Akatsuki organization. The outside world currently only has Cloud Village's Nibi Jinchuriki, Sand Village's Ichibi Jinchuriki, and Konoha Village's Kyubi. Of course, no one knows that the Kyubi's In attribute chakra is in the hands of Uchiha Bito. Once the turnover, plus the temptation of the two masked men, Pain finally couldn't hold back his ambition and planned to attack the Ichibi. Because 6 of the 9 bijou are already in the hands of the Akatsuki organization, there is no need to keep a low profile. Chapter 226. Land of Wind, Sand Hidden Village. The Sand Hidden Village is located in the desert area. Not to mention the shortage of all kinds of materials, the climate is surprisingly bad. The cold wind whistling through the ground blows sand and stones, and the flowing air is full of particles. Even when breathing through the nostrils, sand can enter the village. The Sand Village and the Rock Village are quite similar. They are both in the middle of nowhere. 3 black shadows stood in the sandstorm. They were all dressed in black trench coats embroidered with red clouds. They were naturally Deadale and Scorpion of the red sand. The figure outside was naturally Dustless. Although the 5 major countries are now completely together, they have a lot of private contacts. It's inevitable that someone will suddenly jump out and disturb the mission. Therefore, Pain sent Dustless to support them. The one who complained before was naturally Deadale. This kid's relationship with Sasori of the Red Sand had eased, but it was still not easy to deal with. The 2 art masters were still criticizing each other's artistic attainments. It's been a long time. Sasori, who was hiding in the puppet, looked at the village in the distance, and his footsteps suddenly stopped, and his tone was a little complicated. There's no need to feel emotional about the village that is about to become a thing of the past, Sasori. Glancing back at Sasori, Dustless walked straight to the village in front of him. He knew that Sasori still had feelings for the sand-hidden village. Staring at Dustless's thin figure gradually disappearing in the sandstorm, Deidara and Sasori also followed. Since the Third Shinobi World War, the Sand-Hidden Village's strength has been completely annihilated by Dustless. Now, after so many years of recuperation, their strength is not much different from before. The only loss is the death of the Yondaime Kazakage in the Chunin exam, causing the Sand-Hidden Village to lose high-end combat power. Now, only Gaara, the Jinchuriki, can replace him. My art will definitely be the most reasonable and perfect interpretation in this rotten and barren village. Deidara stared at the village in front of him with shining eyes. He raised his arms with great momentum, and his eyes were tightly locked on Dustless in front of him. There was a faint sense of eagerness in his eyes. Foolish, do you want to challenge that man? I'm sorry to tell you that you're still far from it. Seeing Deidara looking at Dustless's back, how could Sasori let go of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? He mocked and ridiculed Deidara. At the same time, he secretly scolded Deidara for being an idiot. Uchiha Itachi could defeat you in an instant, but he still wanted to challenge Uchiha Dustless. He was really hopeless. Shaking his head, Sasori knew that Deidara would probably be shrouded in the shadow of Sharingan for the rest of his life. A new generation replaces the old. Uchiha Dustless is just an old antique from the previous era. Sooner or later, he will be replaced by me, a rising star, and that includes you, Sasori-san. Deidara said confidently. He is an eagle flying in the sky, and the Uchiha clan is just a local snake that plays with Jinjutsu. Over the years, he has been training his eyes to resist Jinjutsu, so that one day he can regain his dignity. Foolish, Do you think that what you saw in the rock village was the full strength of this man? You're really a kid who will never grow up, Deidara. Sasori sneered and looked at Deidara hopelessly. The strongest in the Akatsuki was not Yahiko or Uchiha Itachi, but the lonely figure buried in the sand in front of him. In fact, I also want to challenge him, but unfortunately, the gap between us is dimensional, not strength. I'm afraid that I won't be able to catch up with him in a lifetime. I advise you to save it, Deidara. Sasori looked at Deidara with pity and said very rationally. Deidara rolled his eyes and directly ignored Scorpio. Seeing this, Sasori couldn't help but shake his head. If Deidara said that it would be difficult to defeat Itachi, it's not impossible as long as he works hard. Challenging a deep-sea behemoth like Uchiha Wuchen is absolutely asking for trouble. The situation doesn't seem right. Dustless's body suddenly stopped, and he stared at the village in front of him. His eyes narrowed slightly, and the whistling sand stopped flowing around Dustless. The Sand Village is also one of the 5 great shinobi villages, but there is no guard at the entrance of the Sand Village. It's incredible that there is no guard at the entrance of the Sand Village. As he bowed his head and pondered, Sasori and Deidara also followed closely behind. I'm afraid they were all cleaned up by the spies I arranged before. Sasori, who caught up, said proudly. When he came to the Sand Village, he informed his former subordinates that the guards outside the Sand Village have been cleaned up. Good job, Sasori. Dustless said softly, casting an appreciative look at Sasori, and immediately walked straight forward. Sasori is a smart person who plans ahead, and he can look at the future development with a long-term vision. He has spies around Orochimaru. The Sand Village also has spies, and maybe other villages also have spies. Looking at Dustless, who had left in advance, Deidara curled his lips and was particularly depressed. He felt that his limelight and lines had been completely snatched by Dustless. He, who was good at acting, had become the audience instead. Don't think that the Sand Village is easy to deal with. If it's not small, it will definitely capsize. Taking a glance at Deidara, Sasori said seriously, none of the 5 great shinobi villages are ordinary targets. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, Dustless, Sasori, and Deidara passed through the high pile of sand obstacles and looked down at the huge village in front of them. Looking down, the defense of the village was quite loose, and the people passing by were very natural, and they couldn't see any conspiracy. It's not a big deal. It's just a chibi. Let me deal with it. Deidara made a giant white bird and flew straight into the sky. Is that a barrier? His pupils slightly locked, revealing the scarlet 3 Tomo Sharingan, and the transparent, invisible barrier was clearly exposed in front of him. It seems that we fell into a trap. Glancing sideways at the familiar figures, Wu Chen's tone was as calm as autumn water. Chapter 227. Deidara, who was soaring in the sky, looked calm. There was a kind of natural and majestic atmosphere when he raised his hand. He glanced at Dustless and Sasori of the red sand, standing behind him on ground. The feeling of flying in the sky spontaneously rose in his heart. This is a good place to display my art to the limit. Joining the Akatsuki was really the right choice. Focusing his eyes on the huge explosion below, the killing intent in Deidara's eyes disappeared in a flash. The instant art of explosion must have a perfect place and the best audience to be implemented incisively and vividly. The Sand Village, one of the 5 major countries, was the best place to test it, and what made him most unhappy was the Uchiha clan's Sharingan and Sasori, who often went against him. A large amount of explosive clay was spat out from his hand. Deidara was indeed suitable for this kind of dexterous work. In just a few breaths, he created a large group of explosive spiders. Immediately, it was like a fairy scattering flowers all over the Sand Village, instantly destroying the Sand Village. Such a masterpiece is in line with the essence of my pursuit of art. Looking at the slowly falling explosive spiders, Deidara smiled gloomily as he looked down at the ninja village below, and the killing intent in his eyes was even deeper. Boom! a series of explosions suddenly resounded through the sky, and the endless blazing flames engulfed the entire sand-hidden village. Even people hundreds of meters away could feel the blazing flames and violent tremors, and the sand-hidden village at the center was even more shaken. It's a pity that it's useless. The sand village has already put a barrier in front of it, and those small spiders are not enough to destroy it. Dustless looked directly at the village in front of him that was swallowed by the fire, and his face was always indifferent. Under the observation of the Sharingan, the transparent barrier was as stable as before, and there was no sign of collapse. The number of explosive spiders was good, but their combined power was not enough to destroy this barrier. Next is the Jinchuriki. Seeing that the fire swallowed a large area of the sand village, Deidara nodded with satisfaction, and his sight spread out, and at the same time, he began to look for the Ichibi's Jinchuriki. That kid couldn't have been hidden by the sand-hidden village. How is that possible? In the sky, Deidara's voice suddenly stopped as he looked at the intact sand-hidden village below, with his mouth twitching fiercely. After the flames were extinguished, the sand-hidden village was intact. His pupils suddenly shrank, and only then did he see the solid, transparent enchantment. Your art doesn't seem to work, Deidara. Sasori raised his head and glanced at Deidara in disdain. Then he said indifferently, if you want to kill the sand village in one blow, you have to use C0 explosion at least. It's indeed impossible. It's unrealistic to kill the sand and the Jinchuriki in an instant. Let's do it together. Don't forget that the other companions are still waiting for us to seal the Ichibi. Ignoring the ashen-faced Deidara, Dustless's gaze swept straight ahead. He frowned slightly and looked at the sand group sweeping over from afar. It seems that the enemy is already going to fight back. The sand-hidden village has been operating in the desert for more than half a century. Compared to the invaders, we are naturally more familiar with them. I'm afraid that when we stepped into this land, they had already discovered our traces. Dustless said, and he wasn't surprised. As the saying goes, there is no such thing as an airtight wall in the world. What's more, in the past few years, the eyes of the major countries have been focused on the Akatsuki. Although they don't know the location of the Akatsuki's headquarters, everyone knows that the Akatsuki loves Jinchuriki or bijou. Therefore, the villages with bijou have become the targets of other ninja villages' spies. Whoosh! Looking around, the dense sandstorm in front of them was coming head-on. The sand up to more than 10 meters high turned the sky into its own color. The momentum was monstrous and almost covered the sky. It was like the end of the world. How can my art be defeated by this vulgar ninjutsu? Looking through the heavy sand, Deidara gloomily stared at Gaara in the distance with a ferocious smile. He looked at the oncoming sandstorm with disdain, and a cold light gathered in his eyes. Looking at the desert with a sneer, Deidara controlled the clay bird under his feet to rush straight without fear. Deidara is enough to deal with the Ichibi's Jinchuriki. Gaara, we don't need to do it. Dustless's calm eyes fell on Sasori. Then he turned his head and looked forward. Suddenly, he found that there were more dense clay spiders in the air. Sasori also stared at the explosive spiders in the air with a stunned expression, and his mouth twitched fiercely. This range has already affected you and me. He seems to want to bring the two of us together. Staring at Deidara, who was floating in the sky with uncertainty, Sasori of the red sand said hoarsely. His tone of speaking was particularly blazing. His whole person suddenly turned into a bloodthirsty, ferocious beast. His eyes emitted a dim light, choosing people to devour. It's not that it seems, but it will definitely affect the two of us. Dustless replied. In the future, during the decisive battle between Deidara and Uchiha Sasuke, this kid will use self-explosion to affect Hoodlum, the masked man, mercilessly. With a sigh, Dustless didn't expect this kid to be so vengeful. Obviously, Deidara deliberately made him look good, and Sasori was just a bystander. This damn brat. Glaring at Deidara fiercely, Scorpio knew that Deidara was doing this deliberately. He quickly took out the puppet he had kept for many years to resist. He was not Dustless, who could ignore physical attacks. Boom! The boundless explosion began once again, and the spiders that filled the sky exploded once again. The scale was even larger than before, and the scorching heat waves that spread out in all directions revived the prehistoric ferocious beast. The terrifying power directly dispersed the sandstorm. Including Dustless and Sasori, they were swallowed by the fire. Chapter 228. The explosive clay next to Dustless and Sasori was also detonated. The power of the explosion was extremely terrifying. Even if the water droplets gathered together, it could form a wave that swallowed the human body, not to mention the explosive clay. The harsh roar resounded throughout the sand-hidden village, and the transparent barrier that was used to protect the village also exploded. "That guy seems to ignore my clay explosion." Deidara turned his head, and the corner of his eyes fell on Dustless. He couldn't help but calm down, and his high confidence instantly fell to the bottom. His heart was full of haze. He had been working hard for Dustless. If this guy can really ignore physical attacks. No, he can ignore physical attacks. Speculation was quickly replaced by determination. Deidara remembered the battle between Dustless and Conan, as well as Uchiha Itachi and Kisame during the invasion of the Sand-Hidden Village. Dustless escaped from Inoki's dust release attack by some strange means. "It seems that the gap between me and this guy is still big." Deidara secretly clenched his fists and said rather unwillingly. Just now, he had indeed deliberately tested the gap between himself and Dustless. It would have been better if he hadn't tried. The cruel reality immediately struck him deeply. Perhaps it was because Deidara was an optimistic person who liked to struggle, so he quickly walked out of the haze. His eyes narrowed slightly as he stared straight at the rapidly approaching black in front of him. The red-haired Gura was reflected in his eyes. "I didn't go to you, but you came to me on your own initiative. You're quite brave, little rascal." Deidara sneered, but his eyes were cautious. His arrogant momentum quickly converged. He knew that strategically despising the enemy and tactically attaching importance. Gaara is also a Chibi's Jinchuriki. His strength is not bad. Now he has a relationship with a Jinchuriki. It's worth it for him to treat him with caution. Those who invade the sand-hidden village must pay the price. Gaara looked at Deidara with killing intent, and his hostility broke out like a flood. Influenced by Uzumaki Naruto's fearless spirit, he has also found his own path, and his hatred of the world has become his determination to protect the sand-hidden village. But even so, Gaara was extremely cautious. The powerhouses gathered in the Akatsuki organization were all genuine powerhouses. All of them were S-level rebellious ninjas. Their strength was genuine Kage-level powerhouses. Any one of them could match the Kage of each village. You want me to pay the price? Ridiculous. A mere brat like you dares to boast shamelessly? Not only will I capture you and bring you to justice, I will also swagger out of this godforsaken place. Deidara was so angry that he laughed. He vented all the discomfort and anger he found from Dustless on Gaara. He waved his hand and used his strongest trick. The ferocious mouth in his palms swallowed the explosive clay directly. C2 Jinryu. The winged Jinryu suddenly appeared in the sand-hidden village. Deidara's eyes were full of killing intent, and he immediately jumped up and flew into the sky. Is it really okay for him to act so recklessly? Sasori frowned and was quite worried. It would be troublesome if he killed Gaara. Although the explosion just now was huge, it couldn't hurt Sasori, and Dustless beside him was the same. Both of them were intact. Don't worry about him. Although Deidara is reckless and impulsive, he is not the kind of person who doesn't care about the consequences. Moreover, we are worried about Deidara and not our situation, Sasori. Dustless looked back leisurely, and there were two figures behind him. He had seen both of them before. Dustless chuckled and said, "We haven't seen each other for many years, Jiraiya." "Ah, we have seen each other many times, but you ignored me. I'm looking forward to meeting you again, Dustless Koen." A soft voice came, and he looked up. It was May of a Mist. What a shocking and unexpected combination. Sasori looked at the strange combination in front of him, and his expression was very unnatural. Konoha and the sand-hidden village were allies, and it was reasonable for them to help each other. But what did it have to do with a mist? This is also inevitable. It is because of the sudden rise of the Akatsuki that the 5 major countries are in danger. They have to put aside their old grievances and have united to deal with you. May licked her red lips and immediately smiled at Dustless. Her clear voice was as pleasant as a silver bell. It was like the bright sun in the winter, dispelling the coldness in people's hearts. Wuchen, turn back before you're saved. Even if you're strong enough to fight against 1,000 soldiers, you're still too weak to fight against the 5 great countries. In the end, you'll still be digging your own grave. Don't go astray. Jiraiya looked at his former teammate with a complicated expression. He tried to persuade him. After all, he was his former teammate, and he really couldn't do it. Jiraiya, maybe you don't know. In fact, I have hated your arrogant attitude since a long time ago. Dustless lowered his head and frowned. He used to hate Jiraiya's tone. He always looked down on others with the attitude of a winner. No one was special, and no one was qualified to say who was right and who was wrong. The winner was the king, and the loser was the bandit. This was the truth of the ancient times. You haven't changed at all. You always think that your beliefs and persistence are right, and other people's persistence is wrong. What qualifications do you have to deny others? Do you really think you are the savior, Jiraiya? Wu Chan sneered. You always think that you are special. What a joke. You are the same as your disciples. No wonder you are master and disciple. And Dustless stared at Jiraiya and May with cold eyes. His voice was extremely cold. Maybe the Akatsuki doesn't have the power to look down on the 5 major countries, but you too can't make a big wave. Go, Sasori. Chapter 229. Jiraiya obviously expected that Dustless would refuse his proposal and took the initiative to attack. As one of the Sannin, except for his Genjutsu resistance, Jiraiya's attributes in all aspects stood at the top level of ninja, and his strength couldn't be underestimated. Almost instantly, he used body flicker jutsu to Dustless's side. Jiraiya, your opponent is me, Sasori of the Red Sand. Sasori immediately stood in front of Wu Chun. For the famous Sannin of the shinobi world, he wanted to ask for advice. He wanted to see whether he was just pretending to be a big-tailed wolf or a fox pretending to be a tiger. Feel you, Amber. Tail spike. A sharp tail suddenly whizzed out from behind, jumping with a sharp cold light, like a snake rushing towards Jiraiya's face. So fast, Jiraiya's pupils suddenly shrank, his body suddenly stopped, and immediately retreated, falling back to Terumi Mei's side. He looked at the sharp spike cautiously, and his whole body was cold. If he didn't react fast enough, his throat might have been pierced by the tail. It's worthy of being the strongest organization of the renegades. Any one of them is enough to rival the Kage of the villages. Jiraiya took a deep breath, and at the same time, he couldn't help but rejoice. Fortunately, the number of people in the Akatsuki organization is only a few, otherwise, the world may be completely subverted. This old guy is so old, but his pure reaction is still so fast. Ordinary ninja would have been separated from his body. Looking at Jiraiya expressionlessly, Sasori was secretly shocked. With the growth of age, all aspects of human will gradually degenerate. The Jiraiya in front of him gave Sasori a feeling of not retreating, but growing. His reaction speed can no longer be described as human. Don't be surprised, the opponent is a Sannin. You can't be careless. This is just his surface. Dustless cautiously said to Sasori, the reputation of Sannin is naturally not fabricated. Instead of worrying about others, it's better to worry about yourself. Dustless couldn't. A ghostly voice came from behind, and a strong fragrance rushed into his ears and nose. Terumi Mei's figure was like a ghost behind Dustless. Pincer attack, the idea is quite good, but it's useless, and this smell is really disgusting. Waving his hand, Wu-chan tried to disperse the rich fragrance that came into his ears and nose. Wu-chan looked quite dissatisfied. He was used to the elegant and natural smell of Otsutsuki Haguro. He was very disgusted and uncomfortable with the fragrance in front of him. However, these words made Jiraiya and Sasori confused. They didn't understand and looked at Dustless. Especially Sasori and Jiraiya. They smelled themselves and thought that Dustless was talking about them. Damn brat. Mazes to tess. Others may not understand hers, because was to her understood. Others may not twos, but she understood it of her. Saying that the smell on my body is disgusting, good boy. Staring at Dustless, May's phoenix eyes were burning with killing intent. The scattered killing intent turned into countless dense ice and stabbed straight at Dustless. What a ferocious woman! Glancing back, Wu-chan turned his head. His whole body was covered in a golden, sacred light. Wu-chan, who was shrouded in the bright golden light, was particularly sacred. There was a feeling of inviolability. He easily resolved Terumi May's attack, and then looked at Terumi May with interest. Your body has grown a lot, but your head hasn't. Have you forgotten the scene of the battle a few years ago? I'm immune to physical attacks. Looking at May indifferently, he nodded slightly and said softly, the brat who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth has grown a lot, but his strength is still not enough to be praised. Her whole body glowed, and Dustless lost its texture as she whizzed straight towards May. Seeing that Dustless had completely disappeared, Terumi May had goosebumps all over her body. She reacted immediately, but it was still too slow for Dustless, who was rushing towards her. Goodbye. Golden light gathered at his fingertips. Dustless looked at May indifferently. When he was about to kill May, a sharp cold light came from behind him. Frowning slightly, Dustless withdrew his attack and dodged the attack with his elemental transformation, easily dodging the fatal sneak attack. Sure enough, seeing Dustless dodging his attack, Jiraiya smiled slightly, and his tone was a little more confident. Immediately, he looked at Dustless with a strong fighting spirit, and his eyes were full of eagerness. This guy seems to be aware of some of the weaknesses of glinting fruit. His pupils shrank slightly, and Dustless secretly said in his heart, Jiraiya seemed to be a rough man on the surface, but in fact, he was a man who did things without any loopholes. Glinting fruit is not without weaknesses. First of all, it is restrained by gravity, and second, every time it moves at light speed to attack people, it must be materialized. For example, when using light speed kick to attack the enemy, it must be materialized. It's impossible to directly turn into light and rush over. In addition, due to the straight-line nature of light, it can't turn while moving. Obviously, Jiraiya was aware of these problems. Perhaps since the moment Dustless joined Akatsuki, he has been studying the weaknesses of these invincible abilities. For me now, any of your techniques are useless. Seeing Jiraiya's face, full of testing, Dustless shook his head and hit him mercilessly. Taking a step back, if one day the ability of glinting fruit is really restrained, the ability of Kekkei Genkai is enough to ensure that Dustless can sleep peacefully. Do you even put me in your eyes? Sasori stared at Jiraiya angrily. Even if his heart was dead, he was still angry at the moment. Jiraiya ignored him again and again to attack Dustless, treating him like air. It was outrageous. Chapter 230. It was no wonder that Sasori of the Red Sand was so annoyed. After all, he was a Super S-level treasure ninja. In the past, he even killed the third Kazekage, who was known as the strongest in history, and made him into a puppet. As a strong person, he naturally had the pride of a strong person. However, in front of Jiraiya, he instantly became a pawn and was even ignored by Jiraiya. How could he not be angry? It seems that the situation is not optimistic. I can only drag it out. Jiraiya saw Sasori staring at him, and his heart sank. Dustless was a super-dimensional monster-type player, and now there was a puppet master helping him. Although it was still a 2v2 situation, it was an asymmetrical war. In other words, this battle was already doomed from the beginning, and May and Jiraiya belonged to the losing side, and they were about to face the inhumane torture. I can only wait for reinforcements to come. After pondering for a while, Jiraiya suddenly made a decision. There was no need to fight Dustless. He could only wait for the reinforcements of the 5 major countries to come and wipe out the Akatsuki in one fell swoop. Although the 5 major ninja villages haven't completely united, their strategy to deal with the Akatsuki was the same. The Mizukage Mei's personal appearance explained everything. The 5 major countries sent people to ambush the Akatsuki. As long as they can hold on for a while, reinforcements will come. Sure enough, as I thought, although the Akatsuki only has a few people, they're all experts. Mei's heart also fell to the bottom, and her mood was particularly depressed. The Mist Sanbai and Rokubi were forcibly taken away by the Akatsuki. The Mist should be desperate to deal with the Akatsuki, but the cruel reality made her firm heart waver. So far, the 6-tailed beasts that were taken away by the Akatsuki haven't appeared yet. This is a huge force that can't be ignored, and it can even change the whole situation. Mizukage-sama, is there something wrong? Jiraiya looked at Mei with a puzzled expression, and his brows couldn't help but frown. In such a special time, he couldn't think too much. No problem. Leave that Uchiha Dustless to me. Terumi Mei shook her head resolutely when she heard this. She quickly hid the panic in her eyes, and then said to Jiraiya. Her tone was filled with hostility. Jiraiya nodded. Although he was confused, he couldn't say much. After all, Mei's identity was the Mizukage of the Mist Village. Her identity was above him, and Jiraiya didn't have any official title. Although the Sannin's reputation wasn't weaker than the Mizukage could command the Mist Ninjas, but he couldn't. What an annoying gaze. Dustless's eyebrows were gloomy, and his eyes were locked on Terumi Mei. That gaze made him feel uncomfortable, especially Terumi Mei's eyes, which made Dustless angry. He felt like he was being treated as prey. Let me see where you get the confidence to challenge me. His eyes narrowed, and the light that shot out was exceptionally cold. The bone-piercing cold light made people not dare to look at him directly. His scorching gaze seemed to be able to blind people's eyes. However, unexpectedly, Mei didn't retreat and took the initiative to attack. On the other hand, Sasori, who had long been unhappy with Jiraiya, launched an attack on Jiraiya and decisively took out his trump card, which was a powerful puppet made by Sandame. Facing the magical magnet release, Jiraiya was also exhausted for a while. He couldn't join forces with Mei to eliminate Dustless. You dare to fight me one-on-one. You really don't know how to write the word death. Dustless looked at Mei faintly, and the sneer on the corner of his mouth became more obvious. He sneered and said, Or do you think I won't hit a beautiful woman? The evil and dark eyes shot out from his pupils, and the focus of his gaze was on Mei. You're really brave. I'm using Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, and you still dare to look at me like this. Seeing Mei looking at his eyes, Dustless was puzzled. It's a well-known fact that you can't look at the opponent's eyes when fighting against a ninja with Sharingan. The black pupils turned into scarlet 5-pointed Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, and the powerful eyes were filled with palpitating power. Even Jiraiya, who was fighting with Sasori in the distance, was stunned. At this moment, Dustless gave people the feeling that he was a demon in human clothing, extremely evil. Don't look at his Sharingan. The Uchiha clan is best at Jinjutsu. Jiraiya thought that Mei didn't know the power of Sharingan, so he shouted at her. Dustless's control of Sharingan has reached an incredible level. Sharingan is his specialty. In the past, Jiraiya and Dustless fought against the Sand Hidden Village and participated in the battle against the Rock Hidden Village. Naturally, Jiraiya knew how terrifying Dustless's use of Sharingan was. Perhaps it's just a casual glance, and you don't realize that you're in the Jinjutsu world. It's ridiculous to say it, but that's the fact. The Jinjutsu of Sharingan is so terrifying. Is it useful? When she seized the Sharingan, It means the end of everything. Dustless indifferently glanced at Jiraiya, who was entangled by Sasori, and smiled indifferently. Some Jinjutsu can't be defended just by knowing its weakness. Tsukuyami. The world in Mei's sight suddenly changed, and she was eroded by Dustless's spiritual power that poured into her mind, and her whole body appeared in a crimson world. This is his Jinjutsu world. Carefully looking at the unknown world in front of her, Mei said in a deep voice, and secretly guarded against the strange environment in front of her. She had a strange feeling that everything in this strange world is her enemy. It's useless. Since you were forcibly pulled into the world of Tsukuyami by me, the outcome has been decided. Everything in this world is under my control, and I am the god of creation. I advise you not to resist, so as not to suffer physical pain. Suddenly appearing in front of Mei like a ghost, Dustless looked at the pretty face in front of him, and a playful smile flashed in his eyes. Let me show you something interesting. In front of Mei's eyes, a crystal screen-like square frame suddenly appeared, and a fighting scene suddenly appeared on it. The content was the scene when Dustless and Conan went to capture the Sandbai, including the final scene of the fight between Conan and Mei. Of course, the fierce fighting scene between Mei and Conan, as well as the secretly watching, Dustless with a sneer on his face, were all played in the crystal frame in front of her. You bastard, I'm going to kill you. Mei saw that she was fighting with Conan, and Dustless was hiding in the distance as an audience with a smile on his face, and there was a playful sneer on his face, which immediately made Mei furious, and her beautiful eyes almost spewed out fire. She raised her hand and swept it over. I should have said that I am the god of creation in this world, and you will only suffer if you resist me. Shaking his head, Dustless stared at the flying jade hand, and the frivolous smile on the corner of his mouth became even more obvious. His whole person seemed to be a different person, and it was extremely strange. He said with a strange smile, "If you don't stop, I don't mind replaying the scene of that day. You bastard, you better not be too complacent." Mei's face was livid, and the hand that swept toward Dustless also stiffened. She quickly retracted her jade arm, and her fierce eyes scraped the proud face of Dustless. If she could, she would definitely tear that stinky face into 8 pieces. She never thought that the face that used to be calm in the face of everything would be so annoying at the moment. But it was precisely because of this that Mei suddenly felt that Dustless was somewhat human. It turns out that this guy also has the temperament of a human. In the past, Wu-chan gave Terumi Mei the feeling that he was like a sculpture. He didn't have the feelings that a human should have. He was like a bright moon that people looked up to. Although his current appearance was a little bad, it finally gave him a layer of color that a human should have. He was not as old-fashioned and indifferent as before. What's so funny about you? Slightly frowning, looking at the smiling face of Mei, Dustless asked with a displeased face. At the moment, this girl was a fish on the chopping board, but she still had the mood to laugh. Tell me your purpose. You deliberately let my Jinjutsu hit you. What is your conspiracy? Even if she was stupid, it was impossible for her to look directly at the Sharingan, especially Dustless's Manjikyu Sharingan. Mei not only knew about it, but also saw it. The Jinjutsu of the Sharingan was known to the world. Mei looked at Dustless's eyes. Obviously, it was intentional. Everyone knew that there must be a demon behind this. You saw through it. Mei just smiled when she heard this, but after thinking about the current situation of the mist, her smile quickly disappeared. She stared at Dustless's face and said seriously, "I'm here to cooperate with you." Mei's face was serious, and she didn't look like she was joking. The situation of the mist wasn't good. They had a lot of advantages outside the isolated island, but they also had a lot of disadvantages. They couldn't compete with the other 4 great villages. And the most important thing is the sudden emergence of the Akatsuki organization. They seized the 6-tailed beasts with overwhelming power. Even if all the ninja villages of the 5 major countries were gathered together, Mei didn't think that the odds of winning were much, or even that there was no chance of winning. Since they were going to hell, it was better to collude with the Akatsuki. Maybe the mist would be destroyed by the enemy forces in the future, but they wouldn't die early. At least, they wouldn't die early. But if they fought with the Akatsuki, their destruction would be close at hand. Cooperation with you? A trivial person who is about to die dares to talk about cooperation. Ridiculous. Looking at Mei with a sneer, Wu Chen didn't hide the contempt on his face. The basis of cooperation was mutual benefit. Cooperating with Mei's village could reduce a strong enemy, but it still didn't make much sense. What's more, as long as he kills Mei directly, the Mist Village under her lead will inevitably collapse. Maybe in this sinister world, the Mist Village will become the target of all shinobi villages. In other words, as long as I have a bargaining chip to move you, we still have a chance to cooperate, right? A confident smile appeared on Mei's face as she asked Wu Chun. Her tone was filled with calmness. What exactly is this little girl planning to do? Dustless's pupils shrank, and his brows were tightly twisted together. He couldn't help but be suspicious. He was curious about what kind of bargaining chip Mei had. He didn't think that the Mist was qualified to cooperate with him. In that case, why don't you tell me? If you can move me, we can discuss cooperation. If you can't, you should know the result. Looking at Mei calmly, Wu Chen said softly, although the leader of Akatsuki is pain on the surface, the two masked men behind the scenes are naturally Uchiha Obito, and the other is Wu Chen himself. It's just that the role of the masked man is now replaced by the puppet Uchiha Kagami he controls. If the conditions are right, Dustless can naturally persuade Pain to agree to cooperate with the Mist. Chapter 231. The smile on Terumi Mei's face became more obvious, outlining a soul-stirring arc. Even Dustless, who lived among the beauties, was slightly sluggish. He unnaturally avoided Terumi Mei's gaze. There was no need to deliberately dress up. The seduction that was imperceptibly emitted was the most fatal. You will definitely be interested in this information, and you can't refuse me. Mei's smile quickly disappeared as she looked at Dustless seriously. This was her bet on the future of the Mist Village. She couldn't afford to fail, and she couldn't afford the consequences of failure. If she failed, the Mist Village would be swallowed by other big countries. The purpose of the Akatsuki is the Jinchuriki. At present, the only remaining Jinchuriki are the Kyubi and the Nibi, and the Ichibi Jinchuriki you are chasing. Mei's eyes flashed, and her tone suddenly increased a lot. The Nibi Jinchuriki of the Cloud Village seems to be a bit strange. If you want to start with that little girl, I advise you to hurry up. What do you want to say? Dustless frowned slightly as he asked with displeasure. He always felt that Mei's words had a hidden meaning. Mei's eyes were fixed on Dustless's body, and she replied directly, "You seem to have killed his younger brother, Killer Bee, and Yondaime Reikage couldn't wait to get rid of you. This doesn't seem to be related to the basis of our cooperation. If that's the case, unfortunately, the cooperation failed." Dustless's calm face was filled with murderous intent. He didn't want to hear such a trivial question. Even if the fourth Reikage hated him, Dustless still lived freely for many years. A man who changes his face faster than flipping a book. Terumi Mei muttered in dissatisfaction and no longer kept Dustless in suspense. She bit her thin lips and said in a deep voice, "The lunatic Reikage seems to have imprisoned the Nibi Jinchuriki. If something unimaginable happens, he seems to intend to bury Yujito Nibi and the Nibi in her body together." Terumi Mei took a deep breath. She couldn't help but sweat for Reikage's madness. Killing a Jinchuriki was something that he could do. If he dares, I will wash the Cloud Village with blood. The murderous aura spread in all directions. Wu Chen's tone was as cold as an iceberg. His eyes were blood red, and his body was surrounded by black fog. He looked like a soul-sucking messenger from hell, which made people shudder. Even with Terumi Mei's mentality, seeing Dustless in this state, she subconsciously stepped back. Their target is indeed the tailed beasts. Terumi Mei looked at the change in Dustless's expression. To be able to anger him like this, it showed how important and indispensable tailed beasts were to Akatsuki. Damn Reikage. The green luster in his eyes was more ferocious than a beast. Dustless found that he had never wanted to kill someone so badly. And with Rakich's crazy character, Dustless didn't think that he couldn't do it. He still knew Rakich's ruthlessness. In the future, in the Fourth Shinobi World War, this old guy will kill Uzumaki Naruto if he doesn't obey. If the situation gets out of hand, Rakich will definitely kill the Nibi himself to completely prevent future troubles. This is enough to prove the sincerity of the Mist Village. Taking a deep breath, Terumi Mei raised a faint smile. It was very charming, like a spring breeze, looking at Dustless seriously. Your chips are still a little short. Unless you tell me where Nibi is imprisoned, or give Nibi to me, I can reluctantly accept your proposal. Shaking his head, Dustless flatly rejected. If she wanted to cooperate with him based on such worthless information, then Terumi Mei was overestimating herself. Are you trying to cheat? Terumi Mei's pretty face suddenly collapsed, and her slender fingers indignantly pointed at Dustless. Terumi Mei didn't release her nether chi, and cursed Dustless in her heart. After cursing Dustless dozens of times, she stared at him with dissatisfaction. That's not what you said before. So what if I cheat? Dustless sneered disdainfully and sarcastically said, Don't you think it's ridiculous that you want me to drag the Mist Village from hell to heaven? Everything has a price. This is not a problem. After a quick exchange of glances, Terumi Mei's expression became resolute. She was now in hell, and there was no way back. When she told Dustless that Rakich was going to kill the tailed beast, it meant that there was no way back. Terumi Mei had to agree. This was the reality. There was no turning back. Deidara should be finished soon. Thinking of the passage of time, Deidara should also solve the Ichibi. Just when Dustless was about to solve the Jinjutsu world, Terumi Mei's slightly shy voice sounded. I just saw the part of your body that was exposed. I didn't see other parts. Don't worry about it. You don't have to worry about marriage in the future. Anyway, I won't tell anyone. It seemed that Dustless saw Terumi Mei's worry. He shrugged and said calmly, This is an unavoidable factor. After all, you were our enemy at that time, and I must pay attention to your words and deeds. As an enemy, it's good that I didn't attack you with Conan. Then shouldn't I thank you for not killing me? Terumi Mei was so angry that she laughed. The corner of her mouth twitched violently. Her eyes were spitting fire as she stared at Wuchan. She had never seen such a shameless person who inverted right and wrong. He was peeking at others, but said it in such a dignified manner. She would never forget Wu Chen's wretched smile. If you want to thank me, I can only accept it. Ignoring Terumi Mei's anger, Dustless calmly said, including the time of the Third War, and later when he went to the Mist Village to catch the Sambai, and today, it was already 3 times that he let her live. It was reasonable for her to thank him. Chapter 232. Jiraiya and Sasori were also fighting fiercely. The range of their battle was also very large, with a radius of more than 1 kilometer. Worthy of being one of the Sannin, Jiraiya, I really can't underestimate him. Not only is he not weaker than me, but I was even inferior to him in the confrontation just now. This old guy is still so strong. Sasori stared gloomily at Jiraiya, who also had a heavy face, and couldn't help but take a deep breath. This old guy is too terrifying, especially after he summoned those 2 strange toads with Jiraiya. Sasori's weakness became even more obvious. Looking up, he saw 2 toads standing on each of Jiraiya's shoulders, and a lot of tiny pimples appeared on the bridge of Jiraiya's nose. He had entered Sage Mode. Damn, what's going on? I just summoned 2 stinky toads. How did my strength become so much stronger? Sasori was expressionless, but he was puzzled. He naturally didn't know what the so-called Sage Mode was, and he had never seen it before, but at this moment, his greatest interest was to dissect Jiraiya's body. What a troublesome guy. Jiraiya, who entered Sage Mode, wiped his sweat. Although he had the upper hand with the power of Sage Mode, Sasori of the Red Sand's puppet manipulation ability was really terrifying. It was as if he was a living person, and the magical magnet release was particularly troublesome and impossible to guard against. Little Jiraiya, every time you summon us, the enemy is not ordinary. An old voice came from the toad's mouth on the left side of Jiraiya, and the tone was a little dissatisfied because when Jiraiya summoned them, it was never a good thing. Yes, boy, I have to cook for the children. The toad on Jiraiya's right shoulder also complained to Jiraiya. For the magnetism of the voice, it was obviously a female elder. Hearing this, Jiraiya just smiled bitterly. This was indeed an undeniable fact. Over the years, when he summoned the two toads of Mount Mayaboku, he encountered unprecedented strong opponents. This boy in front of me seems to be very unusual, and the Kekiai Jinkai of that puppet is very troublesome. I can't be careless. Fukasaku Senin cautiously stared at Sasori's puppet. His toad face was full of caution. The ability to control gold dust could not be described as a headache. That's the third Kazekage of the Sand Village. His disappearance triggered the Third Shinobi World War. It seems like he was forcibly captured and made into a puppet. Jiraiya's tone was very heavy, and at the same time he felt incredible. He naturally knew the strongest Kazekage in history, and he even fought against him once in the past. Akatsuki is really a monster that affects the world's peace, Jiraiya said in a low voice. If the third Kazekage didn't go missing, then maybe the Third World War wouldn't have broken out. To some extent, the person who turned the third Kazekage into a puppet was the culprit. It's my honor to be praised by the Sannin. Sasori lowered his voice and said in a hoarse voice. After all, Jiraiya was a figure who dominated the ninja world during World War II. You have such strength to begin with. You don't need my flattery, Jiraiya said, and looked at Sasori with appreciation. Whether it's strategy or strength, being able to forcibly erase the third Kazekage is enough to prove that Sasori is extraordinary. Jiraiya's eyes couldn't help but dim. He looked at Sasori with a complicated expression and sighed. Both of you are peerless geniuses. The only pity is that both of you are like Dustless. Both of you stepped on the evil path. Jiraiya's mouth suddenly raised a self-deprecating smile. Remembering the words of Dustless before, he suddenly realized that he was just a passerby in the long river of fate. He wasn't qualified to criticize others. Everyone has their own story in life. You don't have to like him, but you are absolutely not qualified to criticize him. It's really like what Dustless said. You're a person who likes to preach, but a hoarse voice gushed out from Sasori's mechanical throat, mixed with the sound of steel, making people shudder. Immediately, his voice stopped abruptly. Looking at Jiraiya, he raised his voice and said, "The puppet made from the corpse of Jiraiya, one of the Sannin, must be very powerful. So give me your body, Jiraiya." Sandaime Kazekage's puppet suddenly roared and stood in front of Sasori, staring at Jiraiya in the distance. Sasori's voice was even colder, as if he was a ghost messenger from hell. Whoosh! Sasori controlled the corpse of the third Kazekage to jump into the air, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. Iron sand Shigure. Whoosh! A dense amount of iron sand roared, and the iron sand was deformed into small particles. There were countless of them, and they carried out a large-scale attack like a shotgun. The speed was so fast that it was difficult to catch with the eyes. There is no possibility of avoiding in that case. I can only fight head-on. The hesitation in his eyes quickly turned into determination. Jiraiya's natural chakra erupted rapidly, and the rushing chakra all gathered in the palm of his hand. The huge blue energy ball was clearly visible. It was madly devouring the chakra in Jiraiya's body and increasing its size and power. Senjutsu, Otama Rasengan. Jiraiya jumped up with the high-speed, rotating chakra ball in his hand, and he rushed straight toward the iron sand that was roaring down from the sky. The Otama Rasengan in his hand that contained the power of nature was also thrown out, and he was not afraid of the dense iron sand. Boom, boom, boom. At the moment when the Black Force Ray and the dark blue halo came into contact, the void suddenly trembled violently, and a blazing wave of air was thrown out. The power was not ordinary. The iron sand that looked extremely hard was destroyed by the force of the celestial method, Super Kodama Rasengan. It was even directly ground into iron powder. Although it was a momentary confrontation, the power of the two was not at the same level. Chapter 233. Seeing his jutsu being destroyed by Jiraiya, Sasori's eyes suddenly became gloomy, and his eyes were filled with killing intent, as cold as frost, and his whole body was surrounded by a majestic chill. He thought that Sasori would go up and fight Jiraiya to the death, but the former calmed down as if nothing had happened. He just quietly observed Jiraiya and the two toads on his shoulders. His chakra seems to be wrong. It's more powerful than mine, and it seems to be integrated with some other elements. Sasori's eyes narrowed slightly, revealing the light of wisdom. A qualified ninja not only needs to know how to defeat the enemy, but also learn from the enemy's moves to improve himself. It doesn't seem to belong to the inheritance of the Kekkei Genkai. It's really rare, Sasori said with emotion, and his eyes were shining. Obviously, he was surprised by Jiraiya's ninjutsu that he had never seen before, and even had a faint desire to possess it. It was obviously a sparse and ordinary chakra, but it seemed to be integrated with some unknown force. That's it. I'm going to capture your sand village. After activating Sage Mode, Jiraiya's strength skyrocketed, and he made a lot of progress in all aspects. His hand seals were extremely fast, and almost in the blink of an eye, Jiraiya already completed the seal. You want to capture me? You're really arrogant. Staring at Jiraiya with uncertain eyes, the killing intent in Sasori's eyes became more intense. When he was about to take out his strongest card to fight with Jiraiya, Dustless's voice suddenly came. At the same time, Jiraiya's jutsu was also completed, turning other people's ninja village into a monster, and then patting your ass and leaving? There's no such good thing in the world. Senjutsu Gomen. The senjutsu was a mixture of 3 kinds of ninjutsu, and the power of the toad oil and the wind release developed the power of the fire to the limit. The terrifying and frightening super large-scale fire rolled over, and even Sasori felt the aura of death that he had never felt before. Looking up, it was the combination of senjutsu of Mount Myaboku and Jiraiya, and its power couldn't be underestimated. Senjutsu, but there are so many flaws. I'll play with you next time, Jiraiya. Dustless appeared out of thin air and landed beside Scorpio. At the same time, golden bones overflowed from his body and wrapped around Dustless and Scorpio. The thick bones formed an absolute defense. Although immortal techniques were powerful, they could not shake the golden bones at all. What an evil feeling. What technique is this? Shima Sanin and Fukasaku Sanin looked at each other in dismay. They could see the astonishment and disbelief in each other's eyes. The horror in their eyes was obvious. Ever since the 3 of them teamed up to release the Sensei spell, this was the first time they were easily resisted. The golden skeleton bathed in the sea of fire was like an existence that could restrain celestial spells. Its solid defense could not be broken through at all. Even if the fire surrounding the golden light engulfed it, it could not melt it. The abnormally thick skeleton was clearly similar to the negative emotions of the tailed beast, perhaps even more so. Golden skeleton. He seems to have released this technique in the past. It seems to be called something like Kintsusunu. Jiraiya suddenly recalled the technique he used when he teamed up with Dustless in the past. Although it was different today, the evil aura was still very similar. Dustless also mentioned this technique to him in the past, and there were some vague memories in his mind. The Uchiha clan's Sharingan. This evil eye power is not weaker than the tailed beast. Sasori, who was deep inside the Susanoo, sighed with emotion. His stooped body slightly raised, carefully observing the huge skeleton. He was stunned. It was not difficult to see that this was only a small part of it. The scale was not even 1%. Sasori didn't dare to imagine how amazing it would be if these bones were reassembled one day. Sinjith, Jiraiya, in my opinion, let's stop here today. See you later. Seeing that Jiraiya was about to fight, Dustless's calm tones suddenly interrupted him. He had to remind him of the current situation. At the same time, He pointed to the unconscious Terumi Mei on the other side. There is no point in fighting like this. It seems that the other side is also done, slowly raising his eyes and looking at the giant white bird in the distant sky. Dustless nodded. Deidara was clearly visible above, as well as Gara, who was dragging his tail, could also be seen. However, Deidara seemed to have some problems. His face was pale and weak. He was obviously still holding a broken arm in his hand. His sleeve was still scarred with bloodstains. There was no doubt that this broken arm was naturally his own. It's really embarrassing. Scorpio originally wanted to open his mouth to mock Deidara, but he shook his head after thinking about it. Recalling his previous situation, he decided to forget it. Although he did not lose to Jiraiya, it was a fact that he was at a disadvantage. There was nothing to be proud of. What's more, Deidara was a bit embarrassed, but he still completed the task. Two giant, white, explosive clay birds fell from the sky. Dustless and Scorpio looked at each other and jumped up. Goodbye, Jiraiya. Dustless looked indifferently at Jiraiya, who seemed to have aged dozens of years in an instant. He retracted his gaze and swept straight towards the distant sky. He could understand and feel the sadness in Jiraiya's heart. Under the reflection of the setting sun, the entire sand-hidden village was in this blood-red setting sun, showing a sign of the setting sun. Jiraiya's back was particularly stooped, as if as long as the evening wind erodes him, he will be annihilated in an instant. The capture of a chibi is finally completed. Terumi Mei, the hidden chess piece, has also been placed. Next, we just have to wait quietly for Nibby's information. Above the endless void, the big bird made of explosive clay flew forward quickly. Its destination was naturally the cave that was sealed before. Chapter 234. In the dark and gloomy cave, even if the light was dim, one could vaguely see a giant with a huge body. It was full of the smell of decay and vicissitudes, as if it came from ancient times. The desolate atmosphere made people dare not underestimate it. The giant looked ferocious, and its 9 ferocious eyes were very evil. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was the incarnation of an evil spirit. Its whole body was uneven, like a dead tree, without any signs of life. There was no doubt that such a ferocious and huge body was naturally the Gedo Mazo. His thick fingers were pointing upwards, and each of his 10 fingers occupied several figures. Naturally, there were also the members of Akatsuki organization. All of them were calmly standing in their own positions, waiting for Dustless, Sasori, and Deidara. Why are you dawdling? Don't tell me you've been killed. After a few hours, Fei Duan finally couldn't help but grumble. It was no wonder that Haydn was so dissatisfied. He was an impatient person, and now he had to wait in this dark cave for a few hours. It was too uncomfortable. Impossible. There must be some unexpected situation that delayed it. A light and sweet, but also unusually indifferent female voice sounded from the darkness. The tone was resolute and mercilessly denied Haydn's statement. The light voice was like a stone falling into the sea, setting off several feet high ripples. It immediately attracted the attention of all the members of the Akatsuki organization, and they looked at the looming figure in the darkness. Even Uchiha Itachi's eyes flashed with ripples. He looked at the hazy figure. He didn't expect that the dark angel, who was usually cold like an iceberg, would speak for others. Conan, could it be Pain, who was sitting on the top of the Gedo Mazo's head, also flashed with surprise. He looked at Conan, who was on the finger of the Gedo Mazo below. So far, Conan was the only woman in the Akatsuki organization. It was self-evident who spoke for Dustless. This is not a bad thing. With a smile on his face, Pain was silent. He quietly closed his eyes and rested. Suddenly, he felt a lot lighter, and the stone that had been pressing on his heart disappeared. Nagato, who was controlling Pain, breathed a sigh of relief. Yahiko was dead, and he really didn't want to see Conan go with him. His biggest wish was for Conan to have a good home in the future. Even if Uzumaki Nagato didn't like Conan's new home, especially his foxy smile, there was no doubt that he was a trustworthy person. Those two art masters won't die so easily. Not to mention they're still dustless. Kisame Kisame said with certainty. After all, he is an S-class ninja. How can he be killed so easily? In addition, there is also Uchiha Dustless. If he is killed so easily, it will be ironic for them. After all, they are from the same organization, especially when he was defeated by Dustless in the past. Let's wait. Itachi opened his eyes. He never thought that Dustless would be killed so easily. After all, he was his elder brother. Although the reason was a bit ridiculous, it was the truth. Time passed quickly, and in a blink of an eye, half an hour passed. Just when Haiden couldn't help but complain again, Pain, who was sitting on the Gedomazo, suddenly opened his eyes and looked straight at the cave in front of him with Rinnegan. Is it that the indifferent voice lingered in the gloomy cave for a long time, and then he saw the Nepenthes breaking out of the ground, and Zetsu formed by Inyang people came into view. Are those three guys dead? Tell me and make me happy. Staring at Zetsu, Haiden asked with interest. He looked forward to Zetsu, but he was destined to be disappointed. Dustless, Sasori, and Deidara soon appeared. You're not dead yet. How can I be willing to die? Deidara's sneer resounded in the dim cave, and then three figures appeared in front of everyone's eyes, but their clothes were really unflattering. Deidara, you are so fragile. You will definitely be the first one to die in the future. Looking at Deidara with disdain, or the broken arm in his hand, Haiden also chose to ridicule him, but his heart was inevitably silent. Bickering is bickering, but Deidara's strength is still well known. Now his arm was broken by brute force, which is enough to prove the extraordinariness of the enemy. Including Sasori's body, there are some messy gaps. The 5 major countries seem to have joined forces. Although there is no sign of a complete union for the time being, I believe that it won't be long before they will abandon their past grudges and completely come together. Black Zetsu said hoarsely, and everyone can hear the heaviness in his words. After all, the power of the 5 major countries is definitely not so easy to resist. Perhaps there are many S-class ninjas in the Akatsuki, but there are more S-class ninjas in the 5 major countries. You seem to have been ambushed. Pain just nodded thoughtfully when he heard this. This is also what he expected. He then looked at Dustless and the others, and his voice was low. It seems that the people who ambushed you are not simple. Sasori and Deidara are quite embarrassed, especially Deidara with a broken arm. It can no longer be described as embarrassing. Terumi may have the Mist Village and Jiraiya of the Sannin. Without any concealment, Dustless said truthfully. A person who could force Scorpio to be in a difficult situation. Without thinking, he knew that this person was not an ordinary person. The 5th Mizukage and Jiraiya. It turned out to be him. There was a faint ripple in Rinnegan's eyes. Pain's eyes flashed with a strange color and a fierce light. He secretly decided that even if one day he meets Jiraiya, his former teacher, he will kill him. For Pain, anyone who hinders the development of world peace must be punished by God. Even his former teacher Jiraiya is no exception. Chapter 235. Looking at Tendo, Pain, casually, Dustless didn't bother to talk nonsense. He didn't need to get involved in the grievances between him and Jiraiya. This was a private matter between them, and Dustless, an outsider, was not qualified to intervene. Temporarily seal a chibi. After pondering for a while, Pain decided. Jiraiya was just a passerby in the long river of life. He shouldn't worry about such a small character. He wasn't qualified. Hearing this, the members of the Akatsuki nodded, and at the same time, looked at the half-dead Gaara with pity. This genius boy who just became a Kazekage was about to fall. He could be said to be the shortest Kazekage in history. Dustless also jumped onto the Gedomazo and immediately attracted Conan's attention. Is there something wrong? Seeing Conan looking at him, Dustless touched his nose and asked awkwardly. Being stared at by such a beautiful girl like Conan, Dustless felt extremely uncomfortable. Even if Conan was over 30 years old, the traces of time did not leave on her face. No. Retracting her gaze, Conan replied calmly, as if she was looking at a sculpture just now. Her expression was very calm. No, my ass. Dustless glared at Conan and secretly slandered her in his heart. Looking at Conan's indifferent face, Dustless was too lazy to ask more. As the saying goes, a woman's heart is like a needle at the bottom of the sea. When she wants to say it, she will say it. When she doesn't want to say it, it's useless to ask. At the same time, Sasori and Deidara also returned to their positions. All the members of the Akatsuki returned to their positions, and the scene suddenly became serious. They looked at each other, nodded, and immediately made the same hand signs. Phantom 9 seals. Kakaka, the tightly closed mouth of the Ghetto Mazo, opened like a stone door, and the breath of decay and vicissitudes came out from its throat. The dense fangs flashed with dazzling light in the dark space. At the same time, Gaara, who fainted on the ground, also floated in the sky, wandering like duckweed. The Ghetto Mazo's mouth suddenly spewed out a special energy fluctuation. The energy fluctuation that had never been seen before was like a tailed beast or the natural enemy of Jinchuriki, covering Gaara's whole body. In the blink of an eye, majestic chakra swept out of Gaara's body. This disastrous chakra was obviously not the chakra of humans. It was like a collection of negative emotions. Hatred and evil were not something that humans could possess. Without a doubt, it was Shikaku's chakra in Gaara's body. Shikaku also seemed to feel the existence of its natural enemy and began to struggle desperately. The chakra that overflowed from the surface returned to Gaara's body. You still want to resist? Fool, get out here. Pain looked disdainfully at the chakra that returned to his body. His Rinnegan burst out with cold light, and chakra gushed out as if it was free, increasing the strength. The other members of the Akatsuki did the same. Increasing the output of chakra, Shikaku's chakra that retracted into the body was slowly pulled out again. The disastrous chakra filled the entire cave. Even Shikaku's chakra that was pulled out trembled slightly with fear and dread. What the hell is this psychic beast? It seems that the tailed beasts are afraid of it, and it gives off a very ominous feeling. Uchiha Itachi looked at the Ghetto Mazo without a trace, secretly peeking at the huge body of the Ghetto Mazo. The corner of his eyes glanced at the big mouth of the Ghetto Mazo, and he felt like his soul was being swallowed. The members of the Akatsuki looked at this behemoth with interest. Obviously, they also noticed Shikaku's fear. This feeling of encountering a natural enemy really puzzled them. No one expected that this ugly big guy could make the tailed beasts afraid. This is a matter of course. With a mysterious smile, Dustless closed his eyes and concentrated on sealing the tailed beasts. Even if Ichibi had never seen the Ghetto Mazo and didn't know what this thing was, there was an indescribable throbbing or fear in the depths of his soul. It's necessary to ask him. His doubtful eyes fell on Dustless, and Uchiha Itachi secretly decided in his heart. The place where his eyes were focused was Dustless's cheek, which always gave him a feeling that he knew everything. Pain just stood there silently, taking in the changes in everyone's expressions. Then he closed his eyes directly and continued to seal the tailed beasts. He didn't intend to explain. Time passed quickly, and the dark cave remained dark. No one knew how long it took, but the chakra of the tailed beast in the Ghetto Mazo was getting more and more majestic, while the chakra fluctuation of the tailed beast in Gaara's body was getting smaller and smaller. The other side was also quickly preparing. As an ally of the sand, Konoha immediately sent ninjas to rescue the Kazekage Gaara. The performance of the other countries wasn't that great. The water country was fine. After all, Mei was the shadow of a village, and she came all the way here to support the Sand Hidden Village. This made the Sand Hidden Village feel honored and flattered. Of course, if the Sand knew that Terumi Mei came thousands of miles to collude with Dustless, they would probably vomit blood. As for the Cloud and the Rock, they naturally didn't deal with each other. It was understandable that they didn't like each other. After all, Anoki killed the third Reikage, the father of the fourth Reikage. Therefore, in the end, only Konoha of the Land of Fire made a substantial action. The other three countries were just watching on the sidelines. Terumi may only brought a few followers. The ninjas sent by Konoha to rescue Gaara were a joint team composed of Kakashi's Team 7 and Konoha's Blue Wolf Beast, Mato Guy's Team 3. Of course, this included Jiraiya from the Sand-Hidden Village, as well as Chiyo, Gaara's sister and brother, Temari, and Kankuro. It was rare to see such a luxurious lineup, and it was not difficult to see that an unprecedented battle was about to take place. Chapter 236. A steady stream of tailed beast power flowed into the ghetto golem's body, replenishing its shriveled skin. The tightly closed eyes on its head slowly opened, revealing its ferocious eyeballs. It gave off a feeling that it had finally come back to life. Only Nibi's Jinchuriki and the other half of the Kyuubi's chakra are left. Suddenly opening his eyes and staring at the eyes of the ghetto Mazo, Dustless breathed a sigh of relief. After so many years of hard work, almost all the 9 bijou that were scattered around the world have been gathered. As long as he finds the last Nibi and the Kyuubi's chakra, he can directly resurrect the Jubi. What is that kid Uchiha Obito thinking? I shouldn't have given him the Kyuubi's chakra. It was my mistake. Thinking about it, Dustless's heart inevitably sank. Where is the Kyuubi's chakra? Only Uchiha Obito knows. It may be in his Kamui dimension. Damn Obito. Suddenly, a light flashed in his mind, and killing intent surged. Dustless scolded in his heart. You better not have any crooked thoughts otherwise. Oomph. For someone like Uchiha Obito, whose will is easily shaken, Dustless didn't want to believe him from the bottom of his heart. He was always on guard. In his opinion, people who can be defeated by Uzumaki Naruto are unreliable people. It seems to be over. Noticing that the tailed beasts in Gaara's body were almost exhausted, Dustless's exhaustion was swept away. Anyone would be physically and mentally exhausted if they just stood there and sealed the tailed beasts for several days. The ninjas of Sand Village and Konoha Village have come to rescue Gaara, and there are a lot of them. Ju's low and hoarse voice suddenly resounded. Previously, his doppelgangers were distributed in the surrounding area within a few kilometers, responsible for the seal's constant vigilance. Hearing this, the members of the Akatsuki who were sealing the bijou opened their eyes and frowned. The seal of the tailed beast still needs a lot of time. Those people are really persistent. Dustless could not help but feel speechless. This group of people really knew how to pick the right time. They did not come earlier or later. Instead, they appeared just a few hours before the seal was completed. Their timing was quite accurate. The spell I set up outside can hold them off for a while, but it shouldn't be able to hold them off for long. Pain's tone was also somewhat helpless. The time of the seal couldn't be interrupted, and Akatsuki didn't have extra manpower to resist them. The seal set up outside couldn't play a fundamental role. In particular, the ninjas who attacked this time were not rookies. Needless to say, Jiraiya and Chiyo, ninjas like Kakashi and Mato Guy are famous, and their strength can't be underestimated. Why don't we use that technique? There's no other way. Remembering the jutsu that Pain taught them in the past, Itachi suggested. At present, this was the only feasible plan. As for counting on White Zetsu's clone to fight the enemy, it was better to directly move the position. The technique mentioned by Itachi was naturally one of the forbidden techniques of Rinnegan, the powerful forbidden technique, Elephant Release Jutsu. After launching the Elephant Release Jutsu, others can get the same appearance as a specific person and can use all the techniques of the specific person, including Kekkei Genkai, but only 30% of all the abilities of the main body. Actions are controlled by the main body, and the main body will lose self-consciousness forever. After the chakra is used up, the control body will die, and the original appearance will be restored after death. The viciousness of this technique is beyond doubt. It must use living people as sacrifices, and once the caster chakra is exhausted, the so-called sacrifice will also completely disappear. That's the only way. Pain nodded in agreement. It was unrealistic to expect White Zetsu's clone to fight against the enemy. After all, the invaders this time are the elites of the two villages. They must take out elite troops to fight against the enemy. Let me, Master Haydn, clean them up and let those clowns know that Akatsuki can't be offended at will. When Pain was puzzled and didn't know who to choose to use the elephant release jutsu, Haydn recommended himself, and his excited voice resounded throughout the cave. After nearly 2 days of continuous sealing, Haydn, who was active by nature, couldn't hold back anymore. He was eager to fight with the Sand Ninjas. I'm happy that you have this intention, but there is a more suitable candidate for this task. You continue to seal the tailed beast. Pain's gaze swept across Fei Duan's body. If Fei Duan had been quiet, he might have considered it. Now, seeing that Fei Duan was so reckless and was mainly venting for his own pleasure, Pain directly ignored him. Sealing the tailed beast naturally can't be wasted. This kind of serious problem is not considered by Haydn. Your IQ will only make the enemy break through faster. It won't play a role. Deadale ridiculed the depressed Fei Duan in a strange tone. When he was about to recommend himself, a sharp pain suddenly came from his shoulder. Only then did he remember the injury of his broken arm a few days ago, and he also wisely shut his mouth. Itachi, Kisame, this task will be given to you too. After thinking for a while, Pain's eyes fell on Itachi and Kisame. In the Akatsuki organization, except for Dustless and Conan's Oracle combination, these two were the most trustworthy. Both Sasori and Deidara were injured, and they were definitely not suitable for this task. It seemed that the risk of this task was too great. Pain's eyes fell on Dustless again, and sighed. I also know that you spent a lot of effort to catch the Ichibi a few days ago, and now you have wasted a lot of effort to seal the tailed beast, but I still have to trouble you to go. Dustless, no problem. Dustless just smiled bitterly when he heard this. Pain's words had already reached this point, and there was no way to refuse. Besides, he really didn't trust Itachi and Kisame. The current situation has long been separated from the historical development in Dustless's memory. Maybe, just like when they were chasing the Chibi, unknown factors like Terumi may will jump out. Chapter 237. Although in the memory of Dustless's previous life, Uchiha Itachi and Kisame still successfully completed the mission. When the ninjas of the two villages came, Gaara had already extracted his Jinchuriki and died. Most of the people of the Akatsuki organization also evacuated, leaving only Deidara and Sasori to stop them. But as the saying goes, plans can't keep up with changes. There are too many accidents in this world. It's not wrong to plan ahead. The leader is really making a big fuss. It's just a group of shrimp soldiers and crab generals. Haydn shouted discontentedly. Obviously, he was very disappointed that Pain didn't choose him. He vented his dissatisfaction. For a battle maniac like Haydn, there was nothing more helpless than now. Shrimp soldiers and crab generals? Hearing this, Sasori, who had been silent all this time, suddenly opened his eyes and stared at Haydn in an unfriendly manner. He said sarcastically, "If a powerhouse like Jiraiya is a shrimp soldier, then I can tell you very responsibly that you're not even a waste." Sasori, who was usually silent, sneered. It was no wonder that he was so angry. He was just defeated by Jiraiya 2 days ago. Now Haydn jumped out and said that Jiraiya was a shrimp soldier and crab general not worth mentioning. Doesn't it mean that he was not even a waste in front of Jiraiya? It's ridiculous. Kisame is right. It's worthy of the zombie duo. It's really the kind of idiot with developed limbs. Deidara and Sasori rarely stood in the same trench. They both opened their mouths to Haydn, but Deidara did it more ruthlessly. He also brought the silent Kakuzu along. "Bastard, what did you say?" Kakuzu immediately glared at Deidara with fire in his eyes. At the same time, he secretly scolded Haydn for being an idiot. Every time he pulled him into trouble, he didn't forget to scrape Deidara fiercely, obviously warning him not to bring him along with him next time he attacked Haydn. "Enough! All of you shut up!" A powerful voice spread out. It was Pain with a gloomy face. Murderous aura burst out of his body, which calmed the scene down. His gaze swept over Kakuzu, Deidara, and Haydn until the three of them had goosebumps all over their bodies. Only then did he withdraw his gaze. As for Dustless, Itachi, and Kisame, all three of them had finished casting their jutsu. "I just need to stall for a few hours." Pain vowed that a few hours of effort would be enough to strip the tailed beast, and then he would be able to retreat safely. How strange, the glint fruit's ability seems to be gone. Dustless's pupils contracted slightly when he sensed the abnormality in his body. He tried to activate the glint fruit's ability, but was shocked to find that it had failed. Of course, his body could still use it, but the body in front of him was temporarily unable to activate the glint fruit's ability. Forget it. Even if that's the case, it shouldn't be difficult to deal with them. With a sigh, Dustless decided not to dwell on it any further. Tailed beasts were important, and the glint fruit did not belong to the bloodline limit. Even if it did not exist in this temporary body, it was not a big deal. Soon, Dustless, Itachi, and Ghost Mermaid all disappeared from the cave. Kakashi, the strength of that group of guys, is unreliable. I heard that Jiraiya-sama was defeated by them. Between the lush forest, several black shadows were clearly visible. It was Team 7 led by Kakashi and Team 3 led by Guy. Kakashi nodded heavily when he heard the words. His mood was particularly depressed. "Indeed, be careful, Guy." Taking a deep breath, Kakashi said cautiously. This mission was more difficult than any mission he had carried out in the past. The enemy was not a single enemy, but the strongest organization composed of all S-class. Akatsuki. Sasuke's eldest brother and second brother seemed to be in that organization. Uzumaki Naruto followed Kakashi and said in a heavy voice. His fists were sweating, and his blue eyes were faintly oozing dark red, irregular blood. Obviously, he was ready to kill. If it weren't for Uchiha Itachi and Uchiha Dustless, Sasuke might not have defected from Konoha. It was all their fault. As for why Uzumaki Naruto knew about Dustless and Itachi's news, it was because Jiraiya had already told them about the Akatsuki organization. Naruto, now is not the time to be righteous. The focus is on the 5th Kazekage, not Sasuke. Seeing Uzumaki Naruto's murderous aura overflowing, Kakashi warned him in a rare tone. As a ninja, if you can't even figure out the nature of the mission, it's better to go home and retire. I understand, Kaka-sensei. Uzumaki Naruto's pupils dimmed, and the dense and oppressive murderous aura in his eyes disappeared. His mood was quite low, and he was silent. Obviously, he still cared about Uchiha Sasuke. Obsession is too deep. Kakashi took back his gaze from Uzumaki Naruto and sighed. He knew that Sasuke's shadow had been imprinted in Naruto's heart forever. It was deeply rooted and could not be erased. The so-called fetter is actually a double-edged sword. Sometimes it's the source of power, giving people inexhaustible power. Sometimes it's also a nightmarish existence, and the shadow in the heart can never be waved away. A weak breeze came head-on, and the fallen dead leaves on the ground were rolled up like the autumn wind and blown to the sky. They were particularly weak and fragile, like a kite with a broken string. They could only drift with the wind. Seeing this scene, Kakashi's eyes flashed with confusion. Perhaps the will of fire may be like the fallen leaves in front of him, and there will be no place for him in the world after this. Don't be confused. I'm here to take you on the road of sublimation, the road to the gate of hell. A black figure descended from the sky. A man in a black trench coat slowly landed in front of Kakashi and the others. He wore a wooden bamboo hat, tied with a white ribbon and tied with many bells. His face couldn't be seen clearly, but when the breeze blew, the bells would make a pleasant sound. Chapter 238. Kakashi and Mato Gai's pupils suddenly shrank, and they simultaneously stood in front of their subordinates, staring at the figure in front of them with awe-inspiring eyes. A black trench coat embroidered with red clouds, a cloak with bells, the fingernails of his thumb and toe were all dyed black and purple, especially the ninja headband with scratches on it. In the entire ninja world, only Akatsuki dressed like this. Long time no see, Kakashi. Raising his head, Dustless looked at Kakashi, who was wearing a mask. He slightly raised his hand, revealing a rather gentle smile, giving people the feeling of bathing in the spring breeze. His sunny face was approachable, as gentle as the morning sun. He didn't look like a member of the dark and ambitious organization Akatsuki at all. Dustless, it's you. Kakashi's eyes widened, looking at the familiar face in horror. Looking at Dustless's black trench coat, his eyes instantly became as cold as a knife. His eyes seemed to be able to cut people into pieces, very ferocious. Kakashi, don't show such a gloomy expression. We can sit down and chat. After all, we were comrades in arms in the past. Looking at the cautious Kakashi with a smile, Dustless restrained his aura. He didn't intend to fight with Kakashi, Guy, and their subordinates. I also hope so, but I'm sorry, we still have a mission. Get out of the way, Dustless. Suppressing the violent tumbling in his heart, Kakashi said in a hoarse voice, while secretly gathering chakra in the palm of his right hand. He could vaguely feel the sharpness of chakra piercing through everything. Raish, looking at the palm of Kakashi, Dustless's eyes flashed with a trace of regret, sighed and said, "Is that so? But I also have a mission, Kakashi, and the content of the mission is to stop your team 7-3. Then go to hell. Otama Rasengan." The orange figure swept straight out like a cannonball, passing by Kakashi's side, shuttling straight away. Instantly in front of Dustless, the palm of his hand was impressively large chakra energy ball. "Naruto, come back. That guy can ignore physical attacks." Kakashi cursed, hurriedly shouted at Uzumaki Naruto. The urgency in his tone could be heard by anyone. Dustless's strange ability to turn his whole body into light, Jiraiya also told him before coming. "Kyubi, didn't Jiraiya teach you that when adults are talking, children can't interrupt?" Seeing Uzumaki Naruto appear in front of him, Wuchen couldn't help but frown, and his voice became cold. As for the super-large Rasengan that rushed over, he directly ignored it. His whole body was covered with a golden luster, and the hard and huge ribs suddenly wrapped Wuchen in layers, forming an absolute defense, watertight like an iron bucket. Boom! 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 The blue energy ball suddenly burst. The gushing air waves blew Uzumaki Naruto away, and the scattered strong impact blew the ground bare. Why didn't he use the trick that ignores physical attacks? Kakashi frowned. He thought that Dustless would directly use elementalization to directly ignore the Rasengan's attack, but he didn't expect that Dustless would choose to resist. "Oh, burn, youth!" A very loud voice resounded behind Dustless. He turned his head and saw Mato Guy. After casually glancing at the hot-blooded watermelon head, Dustless directly ignored him and looked at Kakashi in front of him. I was underestimated. Mato Guy saw Dustless looking at Kakashi again, but he was not angry. He was born to be an optimistic person. There was no word discouraged in the dictionary of life, but it turned into a strong motivation. Strong and powerful legs wrapped around the blue chakra and swept straight toward Dustless and Kinsusanu. Konoha, Vajra Whirlwind. Wuchun seemed to be aware that the attack coming from behind was quite powerful. He turned his head again and looked at the powerful force that was whizzing towards him with interest. Good opportunity. Seeing Dustless's eyes focused on Mato Guy, Kakashi's eyes suddenly burst out, and at the same time, the silver light in his hand turned into a regular thunder and lightning, and rushed toward Dustless with all his strength. It seems that he wants to attack Dustless from the front and back. Boom, boom, boom. Two powerful forces suddenly hit Kinsusanu's body, causing many cracks, which continued to expand and gradually spread throughout Kinsusanu, faintly showing signs of collapse. Did it succeed? Kakashi and Mato Guy looked at Kinsusanu full of cracks, and when they thought that Kinsusanu was about to burst, Dustless's harsh voice sounded. Do you still need to think? Of course it didn't succeed. The thin body erupted with strong chakra and a steady stream of Kinsusanu, and the cracks that had spread before were not only instantly repaired, but the golden giant became stronger and stronger. Boom! Boom! There were two consecutive, dull, loud noises, and there was a strange blood flower in the air. Then, Mado Guy and Kakashi were seen flying backward, lying on the ground half dead and unable to move their bodies. Kinsusanu's powerful force directly hit them and made them vomit blood, and their internal organs seemed to be dislocated. What a strong technique. Kakashi looked gloomily at Dustless inside Kinsusanu, and an unprecedented sense of powerlessness suddenly rose in his heart, and his body was in pain, but the physical and mental devastation made him feel even more deeply. Kakashi, who was shrouded in the golden light of Kinsusanu, felt a sense of depression and despair in the depths of his soul, making him unable to resist. Mado Guy was the same, and his mood was particularly depressed. It doesn't matter if he was defeated by the enemy, but if he was beaten by the enemy to the point that he couldn't resist, then it's another matter. Facing the godlike Uchiha Dustless in front of him, his heart was extremely heavy. Chapter 239. Dustless easily defeated my guy and Kakashi with his bare hands. It was like giving everyone a shot in the heart, including all the members of Team 7 and Team 3. They were all afraid of Dustless. Of course, there are exceptions to everything. The orange figure, standing resolutely, was particularly dazzling, attracting everyone's attention. This kid is really the biggest problem. Lowering his head, Wuchen looked at Uzumaki Naruto, who was half a head shorter than himself. Wuchen nodded slightly, and a faint smile appeared on his face. To be honest, he really has an indescribable curiosity about this boy with a charming personality. To some extent, this world is following Uzumaki Naruto's footsteps. Boy, why are you so obsessed with me? It's Itachi who slaughtered the Uchiha, and it's also him who killed Sasuke's parents. This matter seems to have nothing to do with me. You have no reason to kill me. The golden luster quickly disappeared, and the majestic and overbearing aura was restrained. With his hands in front of him, he stared at Uzumaki Naruto with deep and bright eyes, looking forward to his answer. His parents? Aren't they your parents? Just how heartless can you be? His huge fists were clenched tightly. His face was ferocious, and there was a faint red light behind him. For Uzumaki Naruto, who valued friendship, Dustless's words greatly stimulated him. Even because of excessive anger, the Kyuubi chakra in his body began to go berserk. The Uchiha family is a cursed family. The so-called brothers are just simple parts. Even parents are no exception. The Uchiha are born with ruthlessness, and they will die with ruthlessness. It's quite suitable for the Uchiha's ending. Shut up, you bastard. Uzumaki Naruto's eyes were instantly swallowed by blood, and the chakra went berserk. His body roared like a cannonball, and sharp claws emerged from his 5 fingers, piercing straight towards Dustless's throat. You're fast, but it's still not enough. With a sneer, Dustless sidestepped the sharp claws, and at the same time, his strong and powerful right arm suddenly grabbed Uzumaki Naruto, and his body broke out with a force that directly pressed him to the ground. Boom! A huge pit suddenly appeared on the ground, and his palm was like a black hole, absorbing Uzumaki Naruto's Kyuubi chakra. Although I don't know how he did it, it seems that he can't ignore physical attacks anymore. Kakashi's pupils slightly narrowed, and the light in his eyes flashed. After careful observation, he found that Dustless used his body to resist the opponent's attacks, and he didn't use elementization to ignore the opponent's attacks as before. This way, it's not impossible. The despair in his heart disappeared, and Kakashi looked at Guy. Obviously, the latter also realized the loophole in Dustless's plan, and his eyes were filled with a beast-like luster. I was discovered. It's chakras, chakra, tensei's chakras, jutsu, it's jujitsu with jutsu, and jujitsu's jutsu, jutsu's this. Let me go. Uzumaki Naruto, who was bound by Dustless, began to struggle violently, madly twisting his body, and a strong force resisted Dustless, trying to escape Dustless's shackles. However, Uzumaki Naruto helplessly found that the big hand on his head seemed to have the power of tens of thousands of pounds, and no matter how he resisted, he couldn't break free. The dazzling light coming from the front made Dustless's pupils suddenly shrank, and his brows slightly wrinkled. He slowly raised his head, and it was Kakashi and Raikiri in his hand. You don't know what's good for you. A cold smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and the cold air surged all over his body. The Scarlet Eternal Manjikyu Sharingan was exposed to the air, and the evil eye power in the frame of the glasses began to rage. Wouch! Suddenly looking up, he saw a giant golden arm falling from the sky, like a falling meteorite, mercilessly smashing towards the stunned Kakashi. From the shape, color, and chakra fluctuation, it was undoubtedly Kinsusanoo, but it was localized. I can't hide. It seems that I can only use that to devour him. Staring at the giant arm falling down, Kakashi's eyes flashed with determination, and the three Tomo Sharingan also turned into the same Manjikyu Sharingan as Uchiha Obito. Leave it to me, Konoha's blue wolf beast, Kakashi. Madogai looked at the falling giant arm eagerly, and there was no fear in his shining eyes, and his heart was boiling, and under everyone's surprised gaze, he roared. Sixth gate, open. Madogai's body suddenly flashed with the luster of emerald, and all aspects of his physical strength were strengthened several times in an instant, and because of the fast speed, Dustless could only catch an afterimage. Hashiman Tonku. Sure enough, it's an extremely dangerous technique. This is only the sixth gate, and it's so powerful. If the last gate is also opened, thinking of this, Dustless unconsciously shuddered, and suddenly remembered the scene of Madara being beaten by Hashiman Guy. Although Madogai's performance was just a flash in the pan, it was enough to attract Dustless's attention. Super Peacock. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Madogai waved his fist, and a dense number of flaming fists came out of his hand, and the unprecedented number was overwhelming and dazzling. The endless flaming fists rushed straight to Kinsusanoo's arm in the sky. Bang, bang, bang. The two came into close contact, and Kinsusanoo's golden arm suddenly trembled fiercely, and the blazing fists were not only hot, but also very domineering, and directly broke the localized Kinsusanoo's arm. Damn bastard. I ignored such a dangerous person. Dustless's face was gloomy, although there was an essential difference between the localized Kinsusanoo and the complete body, and the power and defense were even more of a qualitative difference. But it was so easy to break it, which showed the horror of the Hashiman Tonku. Or it showed that Madogai was extraordinary. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.